All right, so welcome. Good to see everybody here this morning, which was under different circumstances. I'm Keith Biggs, and I'm the county judge for Medina County, and glad to be here and be able to listen in this morning on this important topic. Would like to thank the sponsors. When I'm through talking, I'll get the echo out of that, so you won't have to listen to the rest of the program. But thank the sponsors this morning, Capital Farm Credit and the Medina County Farm Bureau. So can we give them a round of applause? Also, I believe I think all the county commissioners are here this morning, and I'd like to thank them for being here and supporting the event. And also, just want everybody here, our local farmers and ranchers, to know that our main objective in being here this morning is that we want to be able to listen to you, support you, assist you where we can, and advocate for you as we move through this process. Thankful that we do not have any of the Screwworm cases here at this time, but we are trying to be proactive in our planning and make sure that we are ready when they arrive. To that point, we've kind of on our local level, we've been working closely with our local and our state and our federal partnerships. So Commissioner's Board, along with our Emergency Management Department, our the Extension Service, of course, our Sheriff's Office, our Animal Control officers that are around the county, our TDM representative. So a lot of you may not know, but locally we have a Texas Department of Emergency Management representative, a CLO, which is our county liaison officer. I had to stop and think about that a minute, but that's Bill. Bill, you want to stand up back there? Bill, how long have you been with the
3 years.
2 years. Okay, already 2 years. So that Bill's works for the state. So we've been coordinating with them as well. And of course, relationships along with our state rep and our senator kind of working on these things. I signed a local disaster declaration Monday the 15th to open up the resources and stuff that are available should we need them, and be able to send requests to the state, and again, being proactive to make sure if we do get a case, we can ask immediately for the resources that we're needing. That was ratified by your Commissioner's Court this past Monday. And that disaster declaration will go through December the 15th. And of course, we could extend it if we need to, or we can certainly end it, which would be an even better thing. Also, just we're trying to kind of have a one-stop shop if you're looking for resources. And so if you go to the county webpage, which is medinatx.gov, right on the home page, we do have the links to the various resources that you might need, and we highly recommend you go there, and we're going to do our best to make sure we keep that up to date for you. You know, I think of all the things that I listened to and heard, my favorite line is certainly the one that was said about the best thing you can do is for your animals to have your eyes on them. At this point, I would also just encourage you, I've kind of expanded that a little bit to say it isn't just having your eyes on your animals, it's really on everybody's. One of the, I think, concerns, certainly on the New World Screwworm, is that a big difference between the 50s and 60s is how many people have cattle and other animals out that don't check on them on a daily basis. So if, and everybody probably has a neighbor like that's close by, so I would just encourage that we need to make sure, no matter where we are, that we're watching all the wildlife, not just the ones on our places, but really trying to just keep eyes everywhere, making sure that if we do have the opportunity and there's a case that we can get right on it and get the resources on it. So again, with that, thank you, welcome. Again, we're here to listen to you and advocate for you. Taryn, thank you so much for putting this on and your staff. And unfortunately, I know we've got 2 pests to talk about this morning. So, but again, I'd like to welcome Taryn at this time. Taryn?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Commissioners, for coming. Thank you all for being in attendance. I'm going to be real brief. I know we're kind of behind schedule right now. Cover some housekeeping things. If we have an emergency, we need to plus the door y'all came through. But getting into the herd, this workshop, protecting herd profitability, obviously, we changed topics. We changed a few topics going with the current situation with Pasture Mealybug and new world Screwworm, unfortunately. How does that tie into profitability, I've been asked. Obviously, we have no forage, we're not profiting on our land. We have no livestock, or livestock are getting torn up by Screwworm. Not profiting there either. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to introduce our first speaker who's covering Pasture Mealybug. We have with us today Dr. Jose Santiago-Gonzalez. He is an assistant professor and extension entomologist with us from Corpus Christi out of our district center there. And one of the key folks from extension that is dealing with the Pasture Mealybug. If y'all have questions, feel free to raise your hand. If he can hear them, we're all good. If you can't hear them, I have the mic with me. So please ask questions if you have. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Karen, for the invitation. I am a field crop entomologist based at Corpus, and as you can detect by this strong accent, I'm a foreigner. I'm not local. So sometimes it happens that I don't pronounce the things like quite well. If you don't understand, please ask. But I will try to convey the ideas with different words. Always happens. I'm used to it already. So no problem. So let's start talking about this situation here, the issue of the Pasture Mealybug. I think this for science and particularly to my field, it's a great year to be an entomologist, because we in Texas we have news that we have several pests that invaded our state in the past years. So, for example, there is the Pasture Mealybug, now the Screwworm. In rice, there is a pest called rice delphacid that also is causing lots of damage, and also the potential threat of the cotton jacket, or the two-spot cotton leafhopper. So it's a very interesting time, right, to be an entomologist. So let's start to talk about this pest. That is a major pest in Australia, and it has been causing tremendous economic damage, economical losses in pastures that are highly productive. It was detected in Texas first it was detected in the Caribbean between 2019 and 2020, and in the first detection in the continental U.S. was in Texas. It was identified in 2025, so last year. But we have been in conversations with people from the valley, and we since 2022, and there has been issues there in the valley since 2022. Because of that, we think that the introduction of this pest to the U.S. was around 2020 as well. Although it was detected in the Caribbean in 2020, we also think that around that area, around that timeline, was introduced in the U.S. Why? Because if in 2022 it was causing some problems already in the valley, the pest can only cause problems if they are already established, and obviously that takes some time. Establishment of a pest takes some time. So we think that around that timeline it was introduced in the U.S. It was reported in Louisiana in 2025, in sugarcane. In Florida this year was already detected. And basically we have been getting reports of its detection all over this area here. This map was updated yesterday. And every day it has been, there's another county popping up, more counties. So the spread of it has been like quite extensive, and it is a very concerning issue right now in Texas. So this is the pest right here. Let me try to see if I have a pointer here. So the adult females are very, very small. It's between 2 and 5 millimeters long. As you can see, they are all oval shape. They are all oval. The nymphs are even more smaller than this. We are currently making studies on the pest, and it could reach, for example, it could be as small as a spider mite. Some you cannot detect it there, with your naked eye, and you need some magnification to be able to detect it. So it goes all the way from the size of a small mite to this size, which are the adults, female. All stages of this pest are mobile, and in 2020, last season, right, when we were getting reports of this pest, and we were not knowing what this pest was. At first, we thought that it were cases of another mealybug that is already in Texas since back in the day. It's called the roadgrass mealybug. There's another species of mealybug attacking pastures. However, this mealybug has been largely controlled by natural enemies in the environment. Actually, the USDA introduced a natural enemy, a parasitoid wasp, that lays eggs on those mealybugs, and they have been largely controlled. So we were thinking at that time that that those cases were kind of a resurgence of the roadgrass mealybug, but there were some incompatibilities. The roadgrass mealybug is a species that at the adult stage they lose their legs and they become like a scale, they stay put feeding on tissues of the plant. They just stay put. But this one here, at the adult stage, can crawl and can walk. All the stages are mobile, and that was the key criteria, the key characteristics that lead us to think, no, we are dealing with a different situation. The adults, here you can see it, are winged, and they are like very small. They are rarely seen around, or it is very difficult to catch them. Obviously, they are primarily found on grass blades and can also be found feeding on stems and roots. And because they can attack roots, they become a very difficult and complex pest to deal with. This will not be simple to tackle. This requires a complete framework to be able to reduce their populations to a non-damaging level. Okay. Sometimes we think about a silver bullet, a pesticide that could kill it, and that's it. No. Here we need to study it, and we don't know much about it. We need to study it to build a complete framework that for example, introducing like host plant resistance or more tolerant varieties of pastures, biological control for sure, pesticides that could be compatible with the strategy, and all those strategies, all those tactics combined into a strategy will have the cumulative effect of reducing the pest to a point that is non-damaging. As of now, because we got this pest last year, what we are trying is to extinguish the fire, stabilizing the patient, and then build upon that, and to create the strategy. That's in the process that we are now. So the life cycle of this pest, they could live about 30 days. They undergo like 3 generations per year, peaking in late summer and fall. For example, first detections this year has been in April, around the Holy Week, more or less that in that timeline. And for the most, we have been seeing lately mostly nymphs, and those are the ones that cause the damage. The literature states that one female can produce more than 100 eggs. Females usually die within 10 days of mating, but they may complete under the proper conditions. They may complete a 100 days, living. They overwinter in the soil, as I said, and because of that, it is a very hard pest to control. And this is all based on literature found in Australia. The damage, well, the adult females, they feed very little. As I mentioned, the nymphs are the ones that basically attack the plant and feed from the plant. And the saliva of those mealybugs, the mealybugs are like a sucking type pest. And they have a straw type of mouth apparatus. They insert the mouth apparatus in the tissues, and they feed from the vascular tissues of the plant. And in the process, they inject some toxins that are detrimental to the plant. They kind of lower the plant defenses, right? And according to some in Australia, it's truly the combination of the insect and other secondary organisms that will come into play. For example, if you are very weakened, right, you are more likely to get a disease, right? Well, the same with plants. Apparently, some in Australia are claiming that the mealybug just affects the plant defenses, and other organisms like fungi come into play and ends killing the plant. But that has to be proven under local conditions, okay? We think that is most of the damage is caused by the mealybug itself. And the result is the pasture dieback. And you can see some of the symptoms that occurs in pasture that is affected. They start yellowing, right? Because of the action, the feeding action of the pest. They start yellowing, reddening, especially at the borders of the leaf blades, and they eventually kill the pasture. This is an example that we found in mid-coast of Texas. So we have been receiving cases of acres and acres lost due to this pest. This is the same area, the pastures in 2024 and 2026. You could see the dramatic difference on pastures that have been established for a while. Yes, sir.
In that last slide, was it the left side, that one, was it the left side is good, the right side is bad?
They are like patchy. The pest typically, it is very difficult for the pest to attack evenly in an area. You will see like patches. Same with fungi. Same with organisms. Unless the population levels are so high that could be evenly spread. Okay, but that is like that could happen. But more at the onset of the infestation, you will see patches. So how this pest spreads around? So it has several dispersal mechanisms. One is animals and humans. For example, you can see that in this cutter here, if I do the click here, let me see. You could see in the cutter. Can you see it from afar? Yeah. They are loaded with them. You can see the legs of this counter. She's a program specialist down there in the valley. working with the Pasture Mealybug since 2022. And you could see here that even by checking the fields, they can crawl over you and you can pass it to uninfested fields. They could also be moved by wind. And there is the question that if it can be moved by hay, it is likely so. There are multiple mechanisms. So one of the management strategies that, for example, in Australia they are recommending there is to clean thoroughly the cutters, equipment, UTVs that are passing through your field, right? If you are gonna get to an uninfested field, you should clean your equipment. Okay, that's something that they are recommending there. But cows can, for example, pass it from one field to the other. What do you do in those situations? We are still studying, but what they do is basically, kind of rotate the cattle from one zone to the other, but basically in the same general zone. It is a very complex issue. But those are how the mechanisms on how this pest can move. This is just observations of producers cutting the hay when infested. You can see like smoke. This is just an observation, right? That could lead you possibly to realize, oh, my pasture could be infested, right? This is just observations. Evidence of infestation and damage are often commonly seen along roadways where this county equipment, for example, in the municipality are cutting the roadsides, those areas there. We have seen it in those areas as well. So they can be spread in mowing equipment. Regarding the question about if you can move this pest in hay bales, I will say that it is probable. Here, my boss did David Kearns in Robertson County. He did just a small exercise. This needs to be, further studied through controlled research. But for example, he did this exercise where he collected pastures from post-cutting but pre-raking, right? Just lay in the field, and he tried to extract the mealybugs pre-raking, and after a couple of days after it was cut, and he found that after 48 hours, the pre-cut contained this much pasture mealybugs per 2 square feet of grass, about let's say 550 mealybugs per 2 square feet of that grass that was cut, and the one that was pre-baled, right, 95.32% reduction in mealybug. So he thinks that the risk of moving pasture mealybugs in hay is not certain, but probably not so great. That's what he thinks as of now. The things that these things, research is evolving very quickly. So although we have this perception now, it might change. We need to do this in a very controlled way. Let's see. What is the host range of this pest? The host range is extensive, but it attacks mostly grasses. We have seen them in Bermuda grass, especially in Tifton, Tifton 85, which appears to be highly susceptible to the pest. In Bahia grass, all of those here that has the asterisk appear to be highly susceptible. All of these, highly susceptible. We have seen some variations in susceptibility, but yet we have not studied yet the differences in the tolerance of those varieties under controlled conditions. So this is basically the list of hosts in Australia, and it's a partial list, so it includes many stuff. I want to point out also that it could go to Johnson grass, hay grazers like sorghum Sudan grass hybrids in turf, San Agustin grass. We have seen it also in corn. But the cases where we have seen it in corn are those when the pasture is adjacent, side by side, a cornfield. And in those situations, we have seen it, attacking or affecting corn. And it might be as deep in the field as 40 rows. We have seen it. I mentioned that already. This is just an example that hay grazer is also a susceptible crop, but we still need to analyze or research onto the tolerance, the relative tolerance of one cultivar to the other in controlled settings. So what is the potential range that this pest could go, right? Or could expand? We don't know. We speculate that obviously in insect cycles, temperature is crucial, a crucial factor, and also precipitation. And we think that based on literature of Australia, the precipitation plays an important role in the life cycle of this pest. And this is just a picture of a fact sheet in Australia. You can find it in the web, or we can help you to find it. Well, basically, it says that the pest is mostly confined to those places where the precipitation is about 19.7 to 23.6 inches during the year. And if you analyze the state of Texas, that precipitation, we can find it from this point and on. Okay? From this point to the east. Obviously, irrigation, which is adding an artificial precipitation to the equation, may expand the range of this pest. But at this point, we are just gathering thoughts and ideas, right? So, what are the conditions that favor pasture mealybug? Well, hot and humid weather. We don't have that, right? Susceptible grass species, obviously, high biomass. And when we say high biomass, is that many times this pest can outbreak starting on the edges, like many other pests, but specifically on those places that are unmanaged. For example, like below fences, ditches that are like unmanaged, right? Those places where the grass grows like uncontrolled, those are the places that you have to check first and try to reduce the incidence of pasture mealybug. For example, it is believed that or speculated that pasture mealybug outbreaks in turf grasses or in golf courses is much less. Why? Because the management is more intensive compared to pastures, right? So those areas where there is high biomass, those are the areas that that will tend to favor them. Like those are conducive conditions for them to explode in population growth. Actively growing grass, that's another factor that is conducive for them. Damage severity, stressed grass will die more quickly, and secondary plant diseases or other insect pests obviously will favor the condition of dieback. So how you detect this? You need to scout frequently. You need to go and scout your fields. Take a look on your fields. Pay attention to those areas that don't look right. For example, if you have a precipitation 2 days ago, and you see areas that looks like drought stress, something is happening there, and you may need to check to see if you have these or others or other other situations happening in your pasture. Obviously, the signs are stress grass in patches, like I was mentioning before, yellowing, reddening, or purpling. It is, this says here, best detected before extensive reddening occurs, obviously. You have to attach the enemy when they are not numerous, right? Treating before significant damage occurs is critical. When we say treating, as of now, we don't have too many alternatives. And I will tell you this because we learned about this yesterday. The first label of an insecticide that it is in the process of releasing a 24C is Zephina insectivalis, which is a modern type of aphidicide or aphicide. And it is coming out with a 24C only for the suppression of Pasture mealybug. Okay? Yes, the alternative of treating now is becoming more real. But you have to wait for that to be released. They are coming with that alternative now. But if you are going to treat for Pasture mealybug, regardless of what type of insecticide is, you have to treat before significant damage occurs. Of course, you need to protect your investment. Inspect grass leaves for nymphs and adults. How you inspect the grass? Basically, you have to check your areas, and they tend to be like more prevalent in the thatch. Very low at the surface level. You scratch the surface level and you will find them below those areas. Why? Because they are trying to find for humidity. They like humidity. For example, you can often see them below dry cow patties. Below dry cow patties, you know that is moist. You can find them there. This is just an example of an infestation seen from a drone, right? From a drone camera or with a drone camera. You could see here a critical infestation. You could see, obviously, the patchiness. This is completely almost dead bahia, and you can see early infestations here. Early symptoms already. Oh, and this is basically one of the examples of the Pasture mealybug when we have seen it. Let me see if we can play this video here. Let me see. Oh my goodness. Can you see them moving? They're basically here enjoying themselves. Here, there's another one. So you can see it by scratching the soil surface and looking into the thatch. That's one way that you could detect, for example, adults. If you were to find nymphs, basically when you kneel to scout your grass, try to look like sideways. And often you will see, like in the grass base, you will be able to see some very small nymphs, like white dots over the leaf blades. And that is why you detect it. You just kind of comb your pasture like this, your grasses like this, and you could be able to see them. Right now, as I was mentioning, you could find nymphs, which again are the ones causing the damage, only at scope level. We at this point we can see it, basically small nymphs and large nymphs. But this slide basically what it intends to transmit is that it is more what you cannot see. It's more what you cannot see. You have to check under the scope as well to see that the world opens for you in working with this pest. These are several lookalikes that we included here in this presentation for you to be able to distinguish Pasture mealybug from other insect or arthropods. For example, here you could see the mealybug destroyer. Actually, this is a friend. It's a ladybug, very minute, but the larval stage of this ladybug, it is like mealy, like powdery as well. but this tends to be faster because lady beetles or ladybugs are predators, and they have evolved to capture prey, right? They are not plant feeders. They go after other insects. But the larvae is different, and obviously they don't have those filaments that the Pasture mealybug has. This one is the roadgrass mealybug that I was talking earlier. As you could see, they are like a scale at the adult stage. They lose their legs. So that is how you can compare or differentiate one pest to the other. It is also a pest of pasture, but it is largely controlled. And some aphids that you can distinguish it from the color, by the color. Pasture mealybug tends to be pinkish to white compared to aphids. Okay, management. You have to concentrate your scouting on those pastures or areas that doesn't look right. Look for the insect and the damage. How you can achieve suppression? Well, like we were saying, mowing, cutting, grazing can suppress them. Fall and winter burning may offer some suppression. Everyone asks for burning. Can we burn the pasture and get rid of them? Well, at least as of now, we don't have data from on local areas. But in Australia, they have been releasing reports that burning could achieve inconsistent results. Some may say that in occasions it will work, some not. But you could expect suppression. Suppression is a level where it's okay, but it's not excellent, right? The action thresholds, when available. Whenever we have products available for treating the pest, and we are about to have one soon, like I was mentioning, Zephina, we will recommend that you treat at the onset of symptoms, at the beginning, when insects are present and symptoms are just starting to show. If problems in previous year may want to treat at early emergence. Sometimes you may not wait for the symptoms. You just need to possibly spray to them. This is a different type of pest, and we don't spray by population size. Maybe we need to spray by just noticing the combination of the pest presence and some symptoms associated with the pest. The treatments, and we are clear here, when available, there are several options. If the hay is within a week of cutting, right, you can cut it and then let it regrow to get some tissue, and then treat it with insecticide. Why we say this? Because the majority of the insecticides that have been already tested, the majority of them will be either systemic or translaminar. They may have some systemic activity. That is, that the active ingredient gets absorbed by the plant, and the insect, when feeding, will obtain a lethal dose that will kill it. Why is that? And not the contact ones? Well, because the neems tends to be clumped at the base of the plant or even at the roots, feeding, right? And with contact insecticide, it will be very difficult to get control. You need something that gets into the vascular system of the plant and kill the pest. So for that reason, if you are in this situation, when you harvest the hay, when you harvest the grass, you need to allow some tissue to get exposed to receive that pesticide. So the plant will absorb that active ingredient. And again, you may be in situations of use it or lose it. You know, there may be critical points, right, where you may need to just, hey, I have the damage already. I need to cut quickly before it is too late. Okay. So if your hay is not ready to cut, when insecticides are available, then we will recommend, as of current research, to treat with insecticide, and maybe you need to retreat in 21 days based on the insect presence and the symptoms. Again, it may require more than one application. How to manage your pastures? Well, you have to fertilize appropriately. So just meet the needs, the physiological needs of those plants to grow and produce biomass. Do not exceed. For example, sometimes we say no, a little bit more is better. Well, it might not. Some tissues tends to fragilize when you have excessive nitrogen present. Okay, so for that reason we say, you know your soil, or you have your soil analysis. You need to add the right amount of nutrients to fulfill the needs of those plants, but nothing more, nothing else. Just meet the needs, meet them. Irrigated areas tend to decline more slowly than non-irrigated. So good irrigation, but proper irrigation, not in excess, is recommended or desirable. Do whatever you need to promote rapid growth of the grass, obviously to kind of escape the pest. Manage weeds, and there is no data to support suggestions that fungicides will aid in crop recovery. As I was mentioning before, in Australia they believe that fungi can also play an important role in Pasture mealybug or in dieback, on the dieback condition. So in that sense, we have not studied that yet here. Those assertions needs to be studied. What else? As we were saying before, avoid moving mealybugs to non-infested pastures via equipment. And my boss included here a point that when exiting an infested pasture, you may spray your equipment with pyrethroid insecticides. And we were saying that contact insecticides were not effective in the pastures because it is difficult to control the pest, in the leaf surface with a contact insecticide based on the biology of this pest. But maybe just over the surface of a cutter, you can just spray it and kill the pest at the cutter. Or you may pressure wash the cutter or the equipment, right? There are alternatives there. Avoid using broad spectrum insecticides for other pests in infested pastures, mainly pyrethroids. Why we say that? Because broad spectrum insecticides will definitely kill natural enemies that are playing possibly a mortality factor over this pest. Recall that we were saying that in the case of the roadgrass mealybug, that one is largely controlled by parasitoids. Then we think that at the long term, this mealybug will also be controlled by natural enemies, but we have to allow them to get established, right? Multiple cases of invasive species has been reported, like for example the sugarcane aphid. You know sugarcane aphid? Basically a super invasive species of sorghum. At the beginning it was terrible, but right now it is mostly controlled by natural enemies. Sometimes we need to pull the trigger, but it is depending on the area of Texas, they could be largely controlled by natural enemies. So in this case, we need to try to avoid pyrethroids as much as possible. For example, if you have fall armyworm infestations and you have a pasture mealybug infestation as well, or those two pests combined in the pasture, we will favor, for example, the use of chlorantraniliprole or methoxyphenoside, which are just more narrow spectrum insecticides. If you have grasshoppers along with mealybugs, then you could use the same product, chlorantraniliprole, which is a diamide product that is, again, narrow spectrum and will not touch the natural enemies in your pastures. If you have Bermuda grass stem maggot, well, that's a different case, because the only choices that we have for controlling Bermuda grass stem maggot is pyrethroids. So in that case, we need to study more on what to do. But maybe it will be a mixture of different insecticides that could target the pest and also target Bermuda grass stem maggot, likely. If you don't know what pyrethroids are, you could find them as labeled as mode of action 3A at the label of each insecticide. Mode 3A. Those are the pyrethroids. So what have we done since we detected this pest in Texas? Basically, as I was mentioning before, we are trying to extinguish the fire by studying different active ingredients that we think have activity on sucking type pests. Okay? This is kind of the general methodology that we have used, but I can describe it. As of now, to determine the population levels for experimental purposes, basically, we go to the field, we establish a randomized complete block design, which is a statistical design very commonly used by scientists, especially in agricultural settings, and we replicate the treatments. So what we are doing is sampling 2 square foot of grass per treatment with a hedge pruner or a hedge trimmer. Then we identify the treatments, right, and we go to our centers. We place the grass into a funnel, a tractor funnel. You can see the tractor funnel here, an 8-quart tractor funnel. Then we place a bulb over that pasture. That is called a Berlisi funnel system. And basically we turn on the bulbs, incandescent bulbs, on that pasture sample, and whatever is living in that grass sample, they will go downwards, and we can collect them in for example, a alcohol jar, like this. Here you can see all the funnels with the clamp bulb over the top, and here the jars containing alcohol. When you remove the clamp after 2-3 days, right, you can find them here in the alcohol. That's how we are assessing the population levels of the pest. So this trial here is one of the very first trials that we conducted, and this was even before we knew that it was Pasture Mealybug. Okay? And we tested these pesticides here. Sivanto at 2 different doses, Mustamax, which is a pyrethroid insecticide, Carbaryl, carbamate, Lanate, a carbamate, and an untreated check. And at this point we were just gathering information on how to study this thing. And here in the y-axis you could see infested clumps. Although we did not have statistical differences here, you could see, for example, at 14 days after the treatment that products Sivanto, the product Sivanto at 14 and 8 ounces to the acre, the tendency was to reduce the population levels of the pest. Sivanto, as I mentioned, is a product with some translaminar activity. You see? And Mustamax is a contact insecticide. So we don't see the effect there. So here we were analyzing, at this point we were trying to see how to analyze this variable, how to assess the damage or how to assess the population level. We didn't know too much at the time. But we conducted this, we used this app, which everyone has available. It is developed by the Oklahoma State University. It's called Canopio, and it basically measures the green level of your pasture and the coverage of the green surface, and we use it as an indicator of pasture health. In this case, the greener, the better. So the taller bars will be the best treatments. And you could see here, Sivanto, they kind of show the taller bars. But look at this one here, Centric and Indigo. They are looking taller bars. Why? Because Centric and Indigo, both they have systemic activity or translaminar activity depending on the type of application. Okay? And that is because we think that those products, they have some very good activity. In the case of Indigo, it is a mix of thiamethoxam, that's the active ingredient that is playing the role here, and lambda. So lambda is a pyrethroid insecticide, a broad spectrum insecticide. Maybe this will be a good option when controlling Bermuda grass stem maggot, whenever it's available. If this product gets labeled for controlling Pasture Mealybug, if you were to have, for example, an infestation of Bermuda grass stem maggot and mealybugs as well, probably this will be a good choice. In the future, nothing labeled yet. So these are some pictures of the differences, noticeable differences between one treatment to the other. This Mustang Max is a contact insecticide. You could see the difference on the pasture condition between the plots. Tarim, am I on time still? I'm not even checking the time that I have been talking here. Here again, you could see Centric and Indigo. BC is a diamide product, and it doesn't have activity on mealybugs. It is a premix actually, and you could see, for example, this large plot here, yellower compared to those two treatments. This is from this year. I conducted this in Raymondville with Daniel Secula, which is a program specialist down there in the valley. And here we tested several insecticides: Movento, Sivanto, Courier, Cefina, and Centric. Movento it has some systemic activity, not labeled in Pasture. Nothing of this is labeled. This is the one that probably will come with a special label soon. This is a contact product, but it's very active on mealybugs. So we test them, and you could see, I would like to drive your attention again to this product here, Centric, thiamethoxam. This is the active ingredient. At 21 days after the treatment, you could see, although there were no differences at this stage, right? You could see the trends. Most of this lack of differences might be due to just natural variation of the pest distribution on the treatments. At 14 days after the treatment, it was very noticeable. For example, you could see significant difference between the amount of mealybugs per 2 square feet in this treatment compared to the rest. The others are working compared to the control, right? But yet they were not significantly different compared to the control. So we need to study more doses. We started to study the lower doses because those will be more cheap for producers, right? But some of these may need to go to the higher end of the range to be effective on the pest. And this is just again the fractional green canopy cover. Here again, the taller bars are the better treatments, and you can see here, for example, at 14 days after the treatments, Centric and Sivanto, detecting more green on those plots. This was conducted in Robertson County by my boss, Dr. David Kearns, which is also actively looking at several treatments. And you could see here several doses of Sivanto, 7 and 14. Zephina 6 and 10, Courier, full dose of 13 fluid ounces to the acre. Centric, again, this is the one that is resounding your ears, right? Imidacloprid, Dimilin, which is an insect growth regulator, Regent, which is fipronil, and Batroid, which is a pyrethroid insecticide. Here at 7 days after the treatment, you could see Centric reducing the population of Pasture mealybug significantly compared to the untreated check. The other products are working, but not as good as this one. In the case of imidacloprid, at 15 days, Centric and imidacloprid both, at 15 days after the treatment, working very, very well, reducing the populations of Pasture mealybug. Imidacloprid is like a cousin of Centric, a cousin of thiamethoxam. Again, nothing is labeled yet, but this is what we are presenting here is just what we have found that is effective. Imidacloprid at 6 fluid ounces to the acre. This product appears to be very good. It could be an alternative, but it may go all the way to 6 fluid ounces to be effective. So currently, for other pests, these doses are more lower for other pests. So from the insecticides evaluated, pyrethroids are ineffective, carbaryl is ineffective, lanate is ineffective. Zephina, we are adding here the quote that is questionable. It is suppression, what Zephina could do. Okay? Remember that this is the one that is more proximate to be, at one step to be approved for treating this pest. Well, here is just suppression that it does, okay, compared to others that are more active. So there might be options, okay. It could be good, especially if you treat them when you detect the pest, very early in the season, when you detect the pest. Because if it confers suppression, if you attack the pest early, this might be an option, right, to suppress the pest. I am testing right now in Raymondville. I'm testing doses 12 and 14 ounces to the acre to see if it's fully effective compared to Centric. But the results are yet to come. Actually, we are counting today. I have my student, which is counting mealybugs today. Dimilin, the IGR is completely ineffective. Courier, questionable, but it might render some suppression. Movento is possible. As of now, it is rendering suppression. We are testing it at higher doses. Sivantoprime, we can call it good. Imidacloprid and Centric, excellent so far. Fipronil, ineffective. I have to say that imidacloprid and Centric, it might be a little bit harsh on beneficials, but at least we have to say that we would like them in the toolbox. We are working on it. So reestablishing your lost pasture, this is more management. We do not know about reestablishing lost pastures. We guess, right? We think that eliminate all grass from the field will be something desirable. Disc the pasture or dead areas, leave them in fallow or plant to another distinctive or morphologically distinctive host. That means maybe legumes, which are not hosted, which cannot host mealybugs, for example. We do not know what grass species may be suitable, non-host, or highly tolerant, but coastal may be the best option among the Bermuda grasses. Again, this is just by observations and anecdotal conversations. Hey, we noticed this, we noticed that, but soon we will be able to study them side by side in a controlled setting, and we could tell, for example, among the Bermudas or among other grasses, which could be less susceptible to the pest. Although the plant or the grass could be susceptible, if it's less susceptible, right, and we plant a cultivar that is less susceptible, that means that the pest, the life cycle could be at least delayed. The life cycle of the pest could be delayed. If it's if it's less suitable host, if the grass is less suitable for the pest, it will tend to grow and complete their cycle in a slower rate compared to in a fully susceptible host. Do you understand? So that in the future could be incorporated in a integrated pest management framework. Again, all the practices together will have the cumulative effect of reducing the pest at the long term, right? So we think that the infested land may need to be without grass for a year to clean it up. And this is just a thought. Information resources, we have a fact sheet already on the web mentioning many of the things that I already discussed here. You can find it in the web in Extension Entomology at TAMU or TAMU. My peer, Stephen Biles, is very actively studying this pest, and he has a blog, and he's posting information very often. You could refer to this blog to know more about Pasture Mealybug. You can call me or also my boss through your county agent. I will not cover this one too. I wanted to promote this too. This is a service that we do. You subscribe to this service. Basically, we are essentially delivering, it's like a small audio update, a podcast, a small podcast where we basically communicate what we see in the crops, on the crops. We if we detect a pest that is close to action threshold, well we say, we have this pest in this crop, and you may need to check your area for taking appropriate action. So this type of format where we just alert producers about pest detections and pest situations in particular crops. These are here a service also of audio updates specially designed for cornleaf hopper and cotton jassid. And I don't know what happened there. And this is a survey. Please help me to complete this survey. Basically, it has like 8 questions. It takes less than a minute, and it is for me to understand what could be the priorities. If the presentation worked for you, if not, things like those I can improve. If the presentation was like not that good, or basically I can get informed of what you would like in the future. Okay, how you would like to be served better. And this complements the survey that Tarin has on his desk. Do you have any question now? First of all, am I on time or?
My understanding is
I'm on time. Okay, sir.
My understanding is there is no federal or state funding yet. Is there going to be any funding, federal or state, that's going to go?
State. I think I don't know how to say this. Well, we are. This weekend was horrible for us investigators, because we had to put together a proposal. We proposed several ideas back in January to work against it, to work towards a solution for this pest, for this situation, and the state released the funds. But we had to prepare in a matter of no time, pull together a group of investigators to help tackle the problem. So state funds will be first. Yeah, and good amount. Thank God. Yes, sir.
Can you intercede broadways then in pastures that the grasses have subsided because of the
Can you repeat that question loudly?
Can you oversee broadleafs in the pastures to feed our animals while we're waiting a year for the mealybug to cycle out? Can you do sunnia or okra or sunflowers? Does it attack broadleafs? And you indicated peanuts as well.
Yes.
So there's a broad array of broadleafs that cattle love to eat.
Yes.
So would you just drill that into the affected pastures to grow something until the mealybug problem cycles out?
That's an alternative. That's an alternative. So obviously, that is a question that I need to answer better with a nutritionist, a person that knows about nutrition, right?
We already know that it works.
That's-
But my concern is, does the mealybug attack
No.
broadleafs?
Not that we don't.
So if we can change the grazing from grass to a broadleaf that the animals can still eat,
It is
we
possible.
can feed our animals.
It is possible. Actually, in Australia, they are doing that kind of approach, especially in areas where are affected, that are left like bare, super affected areas. They list and they use a temporary crop until they manage the situation.
Feed the animals until
Yes,
it cycles out.
that's an alternative. That's there. Again, the most affected plants are grasses, mostly grasses, sugarcane, corn, sorghum to a certain extent, and again, some of these grasses, like hay grasses, are very affected, but broadleaf, so far, no. Another question?
Yes, you said the insecticide was a little bit harsh on beneficials. Does that include honeybees? And if you're using it for hay and feeding it to pregnant livestock, are there studies showing whether it affects in utero any animals? And if you're using hay grown in this manner, how long is the residual effect of the insecticide?
We don't know yet, and we need to answer that question with, for example, if we are going to pursue, for example, the approval of one of those pesticides, right? We need to get together with the company to see if they are able to do residue studies, right? And be able to determine, how the molecule breaks down over time. But I can tell you this: the thiamethoxam is not harsh on it's more benign to mammals and animals like this. It might be harsh on bees. So currently, for example, the product has a label, right? But it is clearly stated when to apply it to reduce the likelihood of affecting bees. So there are alternatives. It's that we need to abide to the label or to a future label to be able to apply it in a proper manner to reduce the risk. Yes, sir.
Is there any study about the life expectancy of the mealybug in a bale of hay? Is the mealybug going to survive for a month? Is it going to survive for 2 months? How do you know when you're buying a bale of hay if it's still infected with a mealybug?
Well, again, we need to study that one under control conditions. So let's kind of think about it, because I don't have the alternative, but let's think about it. So it could be carried by machines in their surfaces, right? I will tell you this: many affected producers in the valley are the clients of hay balers. You understand what I'm saying? The hay balers are moving them around. So, but that is machine. That's a machine. So if you think about it, I don't think that they will have too much chances of surviving inside the pack. But you could move it on the surface, like with the machines. So we don't know yet. How do we will know? We need to study the full thing. For example, we can pull samples from known hay bales that are infested and kind of determine, over time what is the likelihood of getting that pest if it is going to transfer. Another thing that we could say that it is in a bullet point here. The longer you have sitting that hay bale there, the less is the likelihood of moving them out. That's the only thing that I need to say for now. Again, the pest was discovered, detected, and identified last year. So we have advanced, I think, greatly with the resources we have, and now we have more resources coming on, and we will advance, hopefully significantly, with the grace of God. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I will be around in case you have more questions. I will be around for a while, just in case you have more questions. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Dr. Santiago-Gonzalez, for coming all the way from Corpus to join us today.
My pleasure.
Our next speaker is back there. We're going to go ahead and get her loaded up. But I think something we might want to ask ourselves on this is we've always heard this question of, are you a cattle rancher or a grass farmer? So I think we can kind of look at it from that lens. We gotta be good stewards of our livestock, but we gotta be good stewards of the grass that we're growing as well. So while we're getting Dr. Schweiger set up, I know we're a little bit behind schedule, but give about 5 minutes. A couple of farm credit. Medina County Farm Bureau have provided coffee, donuts, and cookies. I also want to say we forgot to recognize Mr. Jason Ott is in the back. If you're from Medina County, you probably know him. He's our regional program leader for the South region and covers everything from Weslaco to Bastrop to Sonora to Austin. So y'all, we'll call it 10:19. We'll get back. Our next speaker is Dr. Sonia Schweiger, and she's going to be giving us an update and an overview of the New World Screwworm. I know this is a hot topic for us, so if you would, please give Dr. Schweiger your attention, and we'll try to get through this.
All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Taryn, for that introduction. Looks like the banter's not working. Is that what's going on? It's fine if it's not. I'll just stand over here. All right. All right. So, yeah. You may need batteries. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. As mentioned, I'm Sonia Schweiger. I'm a livestock entomologist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. I am based out of Stephenville, but I have statewide responsibility when it comes to livestock pests and human pests as well. So I do medical entomology in addition to the pests that attack our animals. And I am part of our New World Screwworm Task Force for Texas A&M and have been heavily involved for the last year and a half to get everyone in the state prepared as much as we possibly could prior to its arrival, and then now that it's here to help, answer questions, give information on this pest, and hopefully alleviate some concerns you may have regarding it. It is interesting to follow the Pasture Mealybug, which probably, in my opinion, is much more of a concern in a sense because it's spreading way faster, but the screwworm does have some devastating implications if it does have the ability to reinstate itself into Texas. So what is the New World Screwworm? It is a parasitic blowfly. It was naturally found in North America, so this is not really an invasive species, it's a reinfesting species, so to speak, because it was here naturally and we decided it needed to go for very good reasons. And the main reason is that it's one of 2 blowflies in the world that actually lays eggs on living animals by choice, and those eggs hatch into larvae that feed on living tissue of those animals. They do not ever infest dead animals. They do not ever infest feces, manure, rotting material of any type. And they do not live on necrotic tissue that you will see on animals as well. So they're only feeding on the living tissue. So as you might imagine, pretty problematic, right? So because they are going to cause a lot of concerns if left unattended. They are treatable. They are able to be dealt with. The problem is if we don't know that they're doing what they're doing, that's when it becomes a bigger issue. So their preferred hosts are going to be warm-blooded animals. Well, that's a lot of animals if you really start thinking about it. So everything could potentially be of impact. The biggest animals of concern are going to be livestock and wildlife, followed by companion animals, which we're seeing a lot of impact to. But it's mostly newborn animals is really where we want to focus a lot of our initial efforts to, in addition to obviously any with any wounds, because that's how they're going to get into them. So the species referred to Cochleomya hominivores. I've been answering fly questions all last night, so I got the other species in my head. But hominivores, and it means man-eater. So humans are also potential targets for this fly, as are birds, but birds are very rare. And when I say very rare, I mean very rare, and I'll show you some numbers to go with that data. And if we don't deal with these infestations, they will become deadly. That's the worst part about all of this. And a lot of times that is either because feeding is in a very vital spot on the animal, such as the head or the belly, right, the umbilicus of that newborn. Those are going to go straight to organs that would cause the death of that animal rather quickly, or you would run into a secondary infection, which would also lead to the harm of that animal. So a bacterial infection or sepsis of something of that type that could kill them. So the flies spend most of their time in forested areas. They're not a very heavily identified species. We generally do not find them in nature, is kind of what this is saying right now. They are not a high-numbered species. They're not like house flies. They're not hanging around your house. They're not coming around the barns. They're not hanging around your animals. They're only there when they need to be there, which makes them very much impossible to manage in the adult stage. Also saying we don't want to hunt for the adult stage. We want to look for larvae, because hunting for adults is really a waste of time. You're not going to find the adults. Even if we have a massive outbreak, you're definitely not going to find them right now because we don't have enough numbers to say that they're out there. But even in areas where they are dealing with them, they're generally extremely hard to identify. When we do find them, they're going to be clustered in small pockets, small groups, all by themselves, and that is one of the reasons why the sterile flies work so well. Best way to find another one of them is to have one of them find them, right? So those males hunt for those females, and they are the best ones to identify where they're located. When they were here in the United States many years ago, this is a map from 1962. It shows you their distribution at that time. They were found in the southern part of the United States, mostly southwestern part, naturally without any trouble, and they would overwinter up into at least San Antonio. They could overwinter further north of that if we didn't have a very cold winter. So they're not going to survive winters. But I'm pretty sure where we're sitting right now does not really have winter, right? So you guys are below that line. You're not really going to have winter anyways, because that's the way Texas is. Parts of us do and some of us don't. They don't do well in temperatures below 50s, just like most flies. So just think about other fly species. When do they go dormant? When do you not see them as active? That would be the same with this fly. It's not any different. It's not a super fly. It gets a lot of love and excitement, and it makes it sound like this is some, super fly that can do all these things. It really can't. It's going to function like other flies do as well. Now, they can be spread into northern states, and that can be problematic, and they can survive in those northern states in the summertime. So that's very important, and that is also one of the reasons why other states have started to kind of take some concerns, right? Not saying they need to just yet, but again, I understand when other states start to look and see at what's happening in Texas. They are only daytime active flies. This here just kind of shows when we expect to see their activity patterns in central Texas. So this is going to be at least 4 hours north of where we are right now, where you would see this in relationship to, again, for y'all, you're probably going to end up in that highest activity period most of the year, because you're not really going to have an overwintering time if they were to be here. So what you will see, though, is some reduction in activity, maybe reduction in populations and infestations in those winter months, but I would never assume, if they did have the ability to reinstate themselves, to be completely gone all year round, because that's unfortunately not going to happen in the southern part of the state, which is another reason why we're not going to let them reestablish themselves into the state of Texas. So the screwworm, as you might imagine, is not the only blowfly in the world, and is not the only blowfly in Texas. There are actually over 20 different species of blowflies in Texas, and last night I opened up my email and there were 100, can you identify these flies? Half of which were blowflies and half of which were not even blowflies. They were other fly species. But the thing is they're not alone. There are other flies out there, and the other blowflies are actually beneficial. They're decomposers. They're doing their job, which is to lay their eggs in decomposing matter, whether it be a dead animal or some type of rotting meat or some type of manure, and lay their eggs. And the reason we point this out is because in this slide right here, the picture to your right is actually a different species. That's Cochleomya macellaria, the secondary screwworm. It does not feed on living tissue. It feeds on dead tissue, but it can be found on animals. So that can cause a lot of concern. So we do see cases of myiasis, which is the terminology given to an animal infested with larvae that are not screwworms. So having maggots on your animal does not mean you have screwworms, but having maggots on your animal is a cause for concern. You don't want maggots on your animals. They shouldn't be there. That means there's a wound that wasn't tended to and it wasn't treated, so now the tissue's died and those other blowflies have attacked it. The other thing that can happen is you can sometimes have both species of maggots on one wound. But if you do see a blue-green blowfly, don't panic. I promise you it's okay. It's probably definitely not going to be screwworms unless you're in a sterile release zone. I have heard that some people have seen those being at when they're releasing them because they're releasing by the millions. But if you live in an area where they're not releasing sterile flies, you should probably never see a screwworm. And if you do see a blue-green blowfly with stripes, it's probably the other species. So again, to break down that life cycle even more, this one shows here the whole thing together where you got your adults down to the eggs and the pupa and the larva stages. So this whole life cycle takes roughly 21 days. It can go a little faster in warmer temps. I think most of the cases we've identified right now have been happening pretty quickly. Those larvae are growing fairly fast by the time they're identified. So those females are going to hunt for a host that has some type of a wound, and these wounds vary, so I'll talk a little more on that in the next slide, and they'll feed off of that, and then they'll come back onto either the same wound or a different wound and lay their eggs a few days later. So eggs are going to be laid next to the wound, they'll hatch into larvae, those larvae will start feeding in the flesh for the next 5 days or so, and then once they're done feeding, they will leave the animal, they'll pupate on the ground in the soil, and then after about a week, they'll reemerge as new flies. So our most important thing we want to do is be able to find that larva stage and stop it, because we're wanting to stop that life cycle as fast as possible. And we can't really find the flies on their own, then we can't find the pupa, so we always target the larva stage. We also target the larva stage because that's the stage causing all the damage, right? That's the stage feeding on your animals. So the first step, even as an entomologist, when I'm talking to folks about it, is I want you to start thinking about where would they want to lay eggs and how do I prevent those sites from happening. That's the best way to protect your animals. It's not what products do I need to put on them, what else do I need to do, it's how do I stop them from laying eggs on my animals. That's the first step. You want to start there. So you have to think like the fly. Where does she want to put her eggs? These flies are really in tune to attack newborns, 100% susceptibility. So they are really inclined to smell the umbilicus of a newborn animal. So the first thing you want to think of is if you have newborn animals being born, you need to be treating those umbilicuses to make them dry up as fast as possible so that they cannot serve as a site for them to lay their eggs. Those eggs will be laid within hours of birth. In Colombia, they go to them within 2 hours of birth to start treating and doctoring the umbilicus. That fly probably could have already been there within a 2-hour time period if you're unlucky and they're already there. So they will find that very quickly. Other sites of concern would be castration sites, any type of surgical cuts or non-surgical cuts, dehorning sites, shearing sites. Also, bites left by other arthropods could be utilized by these larvae as well. So really, they cannot cut the skin, but they can enter through a cut that's there. It does not have to be a bloody cut. It does not have to be a big, huge, grotesque wound. It can be just a little slice. They've used castration sites. I'm pretty sure most of the time that's a pretty small little wound that's left behind when you do a castration, right? Even with banding, it can leave a little opening they can get through. So you have to think of all those places that way could potentially be attacking, and then you want to protect that from being smelled by the fly, so to speak. That's exactly what she's kind of doing. So when she does find a site that she wants to put her eggs, she's going to lay 200 to 300 eggs at a time. One female can lay 1,000 eggs in her lifetime, maybe more. I've heard records of more. I assume that's probably more in a laboratory setting than in the field setting. But either way, female flies can lay quite a bit of eggs. So she'll lay 200 to 300. Generally, you'll get more than one female attacking a single animal if you have larger populations in the area. This picture actually represents female number 2 laying eggs. You have one batch of eggs on the right, and then you've got the other female laying her batch there. Again, those are going to hatch in 10 to 12 hours. They're going to turn into extremely small larvae, about 2 millimeters in size. And most of us are not really equipped to see 2 millimeter size larvae anymore or ever. It just depends. It's not an easy task to identify. One reason why that's really tiny. Secondly, they're clear. And thirdly, they're in the body of an animal, right? So they could be very well hidden. They could be up in the umbilicus. They could be, who knows wherever that wound happens to be. Now the larvae, when they get growing, they do get pretty big. They do grow very fast. They will actually grow within 24 hours. So every 24 hours, they molt into a new life stage. They have 3 stages, so first instar, second instar, and then by day 3, they're already third instars. That's the last stage of the maggot. That's about when most of us can actually realize we have a problem. We may start to smell it. We may start to notice discharge or bloodiness coming from a wound. We may actually start to see the maggots. You could see them sooner, but that means you would have to be doing a little more intense investigation on that animal. And you're not going to see any maggots by driving by in a truck. You're going to have to literally get out and touch those animals. You're going to have to get in contact with them. These, of course, are going to feed constantly throughout that week, that 5 to 7 day period. And again, I think we're kind of on the 5-day period right now because they're growing pretty fast because it's warm out there. They have no other purpose but to feed so that they can pupate and turn into flies. So they're going to constantly feed for 24 hours at a time, right? They're constantly going, and that's how come it can get so damaging so quickly and they can grow so fast. The terminology screwworm was given to the way they look. The pictures here, actually the top 3 are the screwworm maggots. That bottom maggot is actually a different species, just so you can see some comparisons and differences of them. That's actually the secondary screwworm. One of the big things you notice about these ones, the screwworms have these dark tracheal trunks. Those are very indicative to just them, which is nice of them to at least give us a way to identify them in some capacity. Now, we will send those in after collecting them to be tested officially by USDA technically does that. But those submissions are done through Texas Animal Health Commission, and they do have to go through that route of command, and then they go off into USDA for identification. So USDA has a facility in Iowa that does the IDing of all their larvae that are suspicious of being screwworms. And right now they've actually brought 2 of those scientists to Kerrville, Texas. So if any of y'all end up with a larval infestation, your first steps are to contact Texas Animal Health Commission. You can contact your agent and you can contact a vet. And then they'll instruct you where to take those larvae to. And I have another slide to talk about that. So our main goal is to get rid of these larvae. We need to control them, we need to kill them, we need to make sure they don't continue to grow. So that's the important part. Again, starting by not letting the larvae get there in the first place, and then if you do end up with them, clearing up that infestation as fast as possible so that we don't lose that animal. Our intention is not to have the animal die. We can save them, we can treat them, we have things that we can do for them. A little more details on here, again, talks about the distinct odor and how untreated those animals will succumb to those infestations. And generally it's because of proximity of that wound, right? Where it's located, what it's attacking. These larvae, again, only eat that fresh flesh, so they'll keep going into the body to find that if they have to, and that can be very destructive. I'm loving this right now. Okay. So larvae, after they have developed all the way, they then turn into, they leave the animal and then they pupate on the ground. So they'll basically leave the body, they'll start crawling away, then they'll bury themselves, and then they'll pupate under the soil. So that's a preferred option by the larva. If there's no soil, and if the animal ended up on a hard surface or something of that sort, they will still pupate. So that's not going to obstruct them from turning into adults, but they do prefer to have some sandy soils or some type of topsoil to get under, and that just keeps them protected from predation and other things. One infested animal is not contagious. They're not going to infect other animals because of the presence of one animal with larvae. So what that means in the sense is that an infested animal with maggots will not share those maggots to another animal. Now you would still have to assess everybody in the herd, every animal you own, maybe choose to do treatment for every animal depending on the situation you're dealing with, but it doesn't mean just because I have one infested calf that every calf has it. It means you have to check every calf to make sure they don't have it, but it doesn't mean they all have it just because one does. And again, that one calf is not going to be able to give the maggots to another animal. If you lose that animal, unfortunately, to some reason, or if it is a wildlife, which is more problematic, it will potentially become a concern because if an animal dies still infested with larvae, the larvae do not die with the host unless they're really tiny. And that's the only time they do. So they do have the ability to kind of pre-pupate earlier than they wanted to. So we have to be cautious of that, and we need to make sure we properly dispose of maggots even on a dead animal. They will start to leave that body pretty quickly. So once the animal does die and it starts to cool, these maggots will decide to vacate. They'll leave that animal because they know that it's no longer alive. I'm going to apologize because I made some changes and it doesn't appear that they all saved. So I apologize if there's some hiccups in my slide presentation I'm looking at. I'm getting a little irritated by myself because it was my own mistake. So I did add this. I know this is wordy. It's not intended for you to have to read it all. It's for me to remember to say something to you. But they have the guidelines out there for carcass disposal. This really does go more for wildlife side of things. If you have any concerns at all in regards to hunting, Texas Parks and Wildlife is the person you call. Depending on where you are located, depends on what advice they're going to give you. So I think that's important. I was in 2 programs yesterday, one in Junction and one in Wichita County, not technically both in the same time because it's not physically possible, but one virtually. And the wildlife people in each place had different rules. So it depends on how your section of the state is dealing with this at the time on regards to what you would do if you do encounter an infested wildlife animal. So I think it's very important to realize they do have some rules regarding a lot of what I've already said. For carcass disposal, burning is an important option. Freezing is another option. Putting it in a bag, a garbage bag, probably double bagging it is another successful option. But what you do with an infested wildlife would vary, again, which county you're in and who your game warden is. So if you do encounter that, please reach out to them. And I have another slide that will tell you how to contact them. USDA has also provided guidelines. Again, the key is to kill those maggots to prevent them from pupating. It's important that we achieve that even if the animal does not survive. If the animal is too far gone and needs to be euthanized, same concept. You can freeze these animals, you can burn these animals, you can bag that animal up because we don't want those larvae getting into the soil because they will turn into adults. So the biggest issue we've dealt with so far has been the movement of the screwworms. These did not return overnight. I saw a heading yesterday said that they got here, that they all of a sudden showed up 2 weeks ago, and I was like, ouch, that was a horrible headline, because that is not what happened. They've been moving for years. They entered into Texas 2.5 weeks ago, but they did not just get here overnight, right? They've been moving for a while. The movement is because people have been moving infested animals. That is how they got here. They did not get here because the flies said after 50 years, I want to come back to Texas. Well, I mean, I can't blame it, right? We all want to be in Texas, but that is not what happened. This fly does not have that kind of know-how. It cannot fly that distance on its own. It can only travel about 6 to 12 miles, and only if it has to. Because to expend that much energy, it has to eat a lot. It has to find a lot of resources, and if it finds animals on that way, it's going to stop because it's just too much work. So they don't move that long distance. What's happening and what has happened is animals are being moved that are infested. And you know, those are moved in many different capacities. This picture kind of represents how easy it would be to move an infested animal without proper inspection, because that wound is very small, probably 3 inches in diameter. It is full of maggots, it has eggs on it, and there's even adults in there. And if it wasn't a very lengthy drive, the adults may hang on to the animal, but either way, you already got maggots in there, so you've got that next life stage ready to go. So I'm going to briefly go through the history, just to explain what we did to get rid of it, and then what has happened now. Again, this is a natural species to the United States, to North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean islands. We eradicated it out of North America and Central America, and a few of the Caribbean islands, but just the two we have, management of, which is Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it still survived in other countries, is the key part to remember. When we started the eradications, it was because of an incident that happened in the 30s. So 1933, there was a severe drought in Texas, and cattle were taken to Georgia. Prior to that point, they'd never had screwworms in the southeastern part of the U.S. One main reason is most likely they were unable to travel across the Mississippi River. So these flies can't travel expansive areas of water, over expansive areas of water. But we were able to facilitate that and unintentionally provided the screwworm to the southeast. That became a big issue for them. They couldn't manage it. They were having resistance, so they reached out to the USDA. And at that time, Dr. Nippling and Dr. Bushland, who were the entomologists there at Kerrville and Menard, I've heard that they've been at both facilities at that time, were tasked with the process of helping the people figure out how to control the screwworms. So the first thing they had to do was learn about the screwworm, which is what they did. They brought them in the laboratory, they watched them, they reared them, they figured out what they needed, what they didn't need, and how much it takes to grow them, and all that, the information. Plus they learned that the females will only mate once in their lifetime. They had also been doing some work regarding sterile male processes with other fly species, and they said, hey, let's see if we can do that with this one. And when they found out that this fly only mates once in their lifetime as a female, but not as a male, males mate as many times as they can, they said, we could do this if we can make it work. We'll sterilize the males, we'll release them at these wild females, and basically you get no offspring. So they tested this in the lab, and it was effective. So then they tested it on a couple islands, and it was effective. And then eventually they took it to the southeastern part of the US, and it was effective. So they completely eradicated screwworms by 1961 out of the southeastern portion of the United States. And it was done again by the release of sterile males. And that's the only way it was ever achieved, and that's what we still do today. Once they were able to achieve that, they took it to the southwestern U.S., which is everything west of Mississippi, and they successfully eradicated it out of that area by 1966. So yes, we were listed as screwworm-free and eradicated by 1966. No, it did not hold up. So I've seen a couple headlines regarding that. Yes, it didn't hold up, unfortunately, but it held up for a few years. What happened is Mexico still had the fly. And as long as Mexico has the fly, we always are at risk of getting it back into Texas and our other border states. And that's what happened in 1972. And it may have happened in years in between there, but the biggest outbreaks were in 1972, 1976. They did come back in large numbers and cause huge impacts in Texas. That, of course, is when they realized we need to do more to get rid of this fly, and they began the screwworm eradication efforts through Mexico at that time. So that started in 1972, wasn't achieved till 1991 that we completely eradicated it out of Mexico. That's almost 20 years, so keep that in mind. After that, they also said, well, hey, we need to maybe take it even further, because the whole concept was to get it to a location that it would be easy to maintain. Mexico is a little harder, so they didn't really want to keep it in Mexico. So they got Central America on board, and all those countries agreed, and they decided to take it to the Darien Gap of Panama. And the main reasons why is this was a rainforest at that time, completely in that area. There was not a lot of screwworms or other host species for them to utilize in that area, and it's surrounded by water. So they could continuously release these sterile flies in that area and maintain the populations down there in south, which was South America, and that was not able to be achieved for eradication at that time. And this was called a biological barrier, and it worked. And it held up since early 2000s without any issues until recently. Now in 2016, there was a small outbreak in the Florida Keys. Now this is not in reference to what we're dealing with today. It's just important to note that we did have an issue in that year. It lasted about a year. The biggest concerns that I like to point out about this is that one, it went undetected for too long. It went unreported is really what happened. So an animal was identified in March of that year. The maggots were not sent in for detection. And by the time they did submit samples in September of that year, they had already started started to have dead deer. So they were up over 12 dead animals at that point, which is what the graph represents on the bottom, and then several other animals died in the few weeks after they actually reported it, because it had gotten to peak level of infestation on that island. Once they did get confirmation it was screwworms that was killing these deer, which are just in a small group of endangered key deer, they did start to release the sterile flies. That's what that little fly in that graph represents, and the population almost completely disappeared within a month. So the sterile flies are extremely effective. Now they work really great on an island, right? Super fast because there's nowhere else to go. But what happened here is they lost a lot of animals that shouldn't have been lost if someone would have reported that very first infestation that was found. They also were able to control this by not letting animals off the island up into Florida. They did have one that got into Homestead, but they caught it, thankfully. So now our current outbreak is different, right? It's coming up through the land parts of it. It's coming from Panama up into Texas. This began in 2022. Panama started to see an increase in numbers, and they went from 25 a year to 6,500 in a single year. Once it started to get out of control, they didn't stop that, unfortunately, and it began to spread through the different countries. The biggest expansion of all that was, again, animal movements through those countries to different locations, and the intention probably to come to the United States, but I have no idea where exactly they were going, but they were heading to other places to, obviously feed and sell those animals. By the end of November, or by the end of 2024, in November, they eventually entered into Mexico, which is recognized in the gray coloring on that map. And then that, of course, led to other concerns for us. So we shut the border ports in May with a temporary opening and reclosure of those again in June. We did have a human traveler in August that caused a little concern, but it was nothing that we had to be worried about, but they did come to the U.S. We had 3 incidences in September, October, and November, which is missing on there, but it did happen, that we had animals taken to northern Mexico, which were of concern because this was early on in the infestation. So this was in 2025, and we were trying to keep it away as long as we possibly could. Now, the day after Christmas is where it got a little more concerning, and that was when we officially had Tamaulipas infested with screwworms. So when we knew once it started to establish in the states south of us, that it was just going to probably be a matter of time if we weren't able to control animal movements in that country, which, of course, you might imagine is a little tough to do. So by June 3rd, we had our first case, which was identified in La Pryor. That was a calf that had them in the navel. We have since then had more, and I'll show those in just a second. But the current map, which this represents June 17th, I did just check, they have not updated it since then. So this shows our current active cases for the U.S. And for Mexico mostly, obviously, but it does show our release zone, which is the green area at the top of where we're releasing our sterile flies. Cumulatively, Mexico is now over 30,000 altogether. Their active cases per week do fluctuate, but they generally stay up close to 2,000. Other things of importance, the closest case to us in Mexico is 27 miles away in Nuevo Leon. They have 23 active cases within 70 miles of our border at this moment. And only places that are getting flies are what you see in the green. So I asked that last night, but that's it. Nobody else gets sterile flies but what the locations in the green, because those flies are owned by the United States. So we control where they get deposited, those sterile flies. As of 20th, this is the numbers you'll get from Mexico. As you see, they're up over 30,000 on that. And they have, again, just shy of 1,800 active. Really what's important to note on these, because there's a lot going on, is that you can see where those cases are. They pretty much stay pretty close to the same areas we've been seeing for a while. We're kind of watching any westward expansion. Once it got into Coahuila, that's when we knew it was going to get a little bit troublesome for us. The other part is that upper graph, which may be a little hard to see, but those represent the animal species that they're identifying screwworm infestations in. What you'll not be able to tell, or maybe be able to tell, it's kind of small writing and you have to be able to read Spanish to see what it says, there's not wildlife listed. So there are only 20 animals listed that fall under the wildlife category. That's a concern. Now, we don't know if it's because that they're not happening, or they're not finding them, or they're not looking at them. It's probably all three, but we don't know exactly what's going on in that situation. And I say all three because we're doing wildlife inspections in Texas and we have yet to find an infested wildlife animal. So again, we don't know. We only know what we know, and that's what I'm reporting to you right there. The other thing to note is that cattle is the brown bar. It is always the top species. Right now, canines are pretty high in comparison to active cases. So some areas in Mexico, I don't know what the situations are with those canines, with those dogs, but they're having high record cases in those. So they're just shy of 600, and our cattle are 855. So it's pretty close as active at this moment. Overall, though, I think it's closer to like 70% are cattle, which is over 18,000, followed by canines, which are now 6,200. And then we have pigs, equine, sheep, goats, felines, which are less than 200, birds, which are 45 only. So birds are very, very low on that list. I get a lot of asked questions about birds, but they're really not a high species of concern. They just, I guess, don't serve as a good host. But again, just so you have information there. So the Texas data, though, we now, as of yesterday, have 16 confirmed cases altogether. 14 are listed as active. So 2 are now listed as inactive. The Sutton animal, I believe, did not survive. I don't want to say it was the infestation because I don't know what the stipulations were behind that animal, but is no longer with us. The dog is, which is the New Mexico one, I believe the dog was not put down, but the dog is now listed as inactive. So she's been treated. I don't know what is on the dog. I do know there's a nice little article about that dog out there now if you want to read more on the puppy dog that ended up with an infestation. So the others, this map here represents the counties and where those infestations are located. So those are Terrell, which is the newest one. That would be your most western species. Next to it is Crockett. So Crockett and Terrell were the last 2 added. Then we have Edwards, which is below the blue. Above it is Tom Green, Gillespie to the east of those ones. And then down south, the 2 that started off with our infestations are Zavala and LaSalle counties. And the animal species are goats, cattle, sheep, cattle, goats, dog. So mostly cattle, again. So I see cameras, so I'll just wait a second. And all of these maps, at least this one and the first map I showed you, can all be found at screwworm.gov if you would like to keep a track of what's going on as well. So what happens now that we have an infestation? So if you end up in an area, you do end up in what's called an infestation zone. What will happen is there'll be certain things that will go into effect, and all of this has happened. So if any of y'all are coming from those areas, you've dealt with this, you'll know. So surveillance will be increased. There is surveillance already happening along our border in multiple areas, but if you end up in an infestation zone, surveillance is increased a lot, 100% probably. Education and outreach, which we've been doing, but now has further been increased, as well as inspections of animals through both checkpoints, through movements. If you want to move those animals, they have to be inspected. So there's controlled movements and that sort, and then any animals that are staying in that area, they need to be inspected as well to ensure that they're not infested. And then sterile flies are being released. Those are happening fairly quickly. So early on, there was a USDA put together what's called their USDA playbook, their New World Screwworm playbook, where they had a lot of insight from many folks. And this is one of the slides from that showing what would happen. There would be an infestation zone, which is in the yellow, and there would be the adjacent zone, which is in the blue. Now, blue is not any restrictions, it's just let's do something different because we're close to an infestation zone. I'm going to break that down further, but I just wanted to show that this is not new. This was thought of way before we had our first case. These zones are 20 kilometers and then another 20 kilometers surrounding that. Our current ones, which were literally just updated this morning, so thankfully this slide stayed in there because a lot of my slides changed when I went from my computer to this one, does show our current active infestation zones. These zones will stay active for at least 90 days. So there is a 90-day window. It's 3 life cycles of the fly is what they're going off of. So, and if they don't find anything in there and everything ceased to exist, they may release them early, but expect at least a 90-day period. Now again, the one where the animal had not survived, there were initially, I think, was not an infestation zone around that animal because it did not warrant one, but you can see the 8 that are there. Now, obviously, these do not incorporate just the infested county, so that's the other part of that. Now, I do apologize, I did update this to have Hondo, but my computer and my jump drive did not want to talk together today. I don't know what's going on. So we'll just use Junction as an example, and I apologize because I wanted to have y'all's area, and I went through and did this, but it did not choose to save it. So I'm going to check real quick and see if maybe my jump drive has, no, that's the right presentation. You know, technology is always fun. So I do apologize for that. But we can still do this with this one, and if we need to pull up the other, I promise I can do that for y'all. Okay, go back to my slideshow. Okay, so this is Junction, if we were there, it's where I was last night. Again, I apologize it doesn't have you, but what happens if you go into this interactive map? So this is the interactive map Texas Animal Health Commission put together. You can go to it, and at the upper corner, you put in where you live. You can put your town, you can put your exact address. If you're in a zone, I recommend you using your exact address so you know exactly where you fall, because it could vary, you know, by block, to be honest, when you get down to it. But when you put Junction or Hondo, which is what I did, and sorry it's not there, you're not in a zone. They're currently in the white, so it'll come up looking like this. What they're just saying is, hey, monitor your animals more frequently, which is what we've been telling everybody anyways. Cover and treat wounds, and you know, if you see anything, report it. All the basic steps that we've been talking about anyways. When you zoom out, and again, this was Junction, you all are south of here, but you do have infestation zones around you. You can be close to one. So there could be people here that are in an infestation zone. The fact they don't have your exact one up there doesn't matter. What you need to check is to see if you are. So if you fall in an adjacent surveillance zone, though, which is the blue ring around the infested zone, you are getting flies. Now, you don't have any animal movement restrictions, but you're getting flies in that area, so we're going to ask you to not trap for flies more than you need to right now. Don't do excessive treating for flies more than you need to for your animals right now, because you could be killing our working flies, right? We're putting millions of flies out per week, and we don't want them getting killed before they get to do their job, which is to mate with all those wild females so that we can break this population back out and not have cases. So sterile flies are being released. You're having fly surveillance that's being conducted by USDA at this time, and there's passive animal surveillance. So there may be some tendencies, you may get stopped traveling or something. I don't know exactly what passive means, but more of it's producer driven. But if you do want to travel into an infested area with an animal, expect to be stopped. And if you do want to travel just through and keep going, you can do that. So there's been questions on, can I travel through these areas? Yes, travel through them. What was mentioned last night is if you need gas, fill up before you hit that infested zone, and don't stop in the middle of it to get gas with your truckload of cattle, because those truckload of cattle may not be able to leave if you stay too long. That's not happening yet, but that was the suggestion. Make sure you got gas before you travel through a zone, because there are inspections occurring in the zones. Not so much in the blue. The blue is just more of a, hey, you're close to a zone. This is what you need to be knowledgeable of, and then it goes into monitoring your animals, covering everything, and reporting suspicion. If you fall in an infested zone, though, you are technically in a quarantine zone. The terminology quarantine has to be used for legal purposes, but it's not a mandatory, I cannot move my animal quarantine. There are mandated situations in which you have to follow, but they're not that the animal can't be moved. So right now it says all warm-blooded animals in the zone may not move out of the zone without prior authorization from Texas Animal Health Commission. So what does that mean? You call Animal Health Commission, you say, hey, I gotta move animals, they gotta go to this area. They say, okay, when you going? Okay, let's come out, we'll do the check this day. If you hadn't already treated your animals, you're gonna need to treat them before you move them. They're not letting you take an animal out of a zone without a treatment done to that animal, whether it had or had not had maggots on it. If it had maggots on it, it's not going anywhere until they say that animal can move. That animal is quarantined and staying put till it's healthy. But the other animals can go. Now there is a 48-hour wait period after treatment. So you want to make sure you plan for this. Like, you need to take them to the sale barn. You need to call today. If you're moving them later on in the week or early next week, I would call today when you leave. Because you want to get on that schedule so they come and check them in time. You get them treated in time, because there's a 48-hour wait before they can leave the premise after treatment. And your inspections only go for 3 days. So, very short window. And if you fall out of that 3 days, you got to get them re-inspected. You won't have to retreat them because the product doesn't allow that, but you will have to have them re-inspected to be moved at that point. Again, it doesn't mean they can't go, and it does depend on where they're going. So I said they have to be treated, but if they're going to slaughter and they're found to be maggot-free, they're not forcing treatment on those animals, because then you can't send it to slaughter, right? They got withdrawal periods. So there are a lot of different rules. Nothing is directly, it's all this. It is not all this. It is this, and this. It depends on you and your animal species and what you're doing with your animal species. If you're not moving those animals, they are not required to get treatment unless they are infested. You do need to get them inspected. You need to inspect them. You need to maybe have them come out. If you find anything, definitely report that. And then treatment is required, because we have to kill those larvae. But you do not have to treat them just because they're staying there. Now, for protection, you may want to treat them, and that is allowable as well, but that's a decision you would make in your ends. So again, it says here, moving outside, must contact. During the inspection, animal health officials will fill out an animal movement certification. If you do not have that certificate, they're not going anywhere. And if you take them somewhere, they're going to be told to take them back home, and we will not take your animals without your certification. All these facilities that you were bringing them to are going to go and do the exact same thing I did here. Go to that map, put in your address, and if you come back as an infested zone and you don't have your certificate, they will not let you take your animals there. They will not let them get off the truck. So make sure you do your part first. If you don't need to move, monitor them closely for wounds. If you see wounds, treat wounds. Treating wounds does not need to be chemicals of insecticides. It just needs to be wound treatments and covers if there's no larva present. And then again, report suspicious, anything suspicious, and regulatory activities in this area can include. So they are also releasing flies in that zone. So what else is happening in that zone, just to break that down more? The management process, which is occurring in any of those areas, is trapping. Now these are our sticky traps. They're not using sticky traps in release zones. They will move those outside the zone to a surrounding area to watch if any do get out of that area. The reason is because they will attract all of the ones we're releasing. Again, we don't want to take the ones that are doing a job for us out of the system. We need them to do their job. And those males will mate for 10 days nonstop, as many females they can find. So we want them to do that job. So there won't be the sticky traps if you're in the blue or the yellow, but there will be surrounding it. They will use other trap methods to identify that there's presence of flies. They want to make sure flies are getting to where they're putting them. Surveillance of the larva, which is monitoring animals. That's the only way you're going to find larvae. They live nowhere else but inside the animals' bodies. So we have to inspect the animals. And then sterile fly releases. Now we put this together and we'll leave it at the 48 hours just in case, but flies will be released within 48 hours if not sooner. Most situations have been within 12 hours or less right now. So generally by the time they know it's occurred or they have a case confirmed, they're already prepped what they're going to do the next morning. I don't know if they've started releasing in Terrell County this morning, but I assume they probably have, or they will be very shortly. I saw a few cameras, so that's the only reason why I stalled. So the sterile flies are only produced in Panama right now. It's our only functioning facility. These are reared in a laboratory setting, but these are laboratories the size of multi-big Costco's, like 2 Costco size. They're massive buildings that rear these flies from start to finish. These are not devices that you can just stick up anywhere because they have high security. They're a BSL-3, which is biosecurity level 3, which is the highest security we put on anything because we're growing flies that live on meat byproducts that smells terrible, and we are growing a fly that if it gets out will cause a lot of destruction, right? So it has to be under high security. These people don't even get to wear their own clothing into the building. Every day they have to put on disposable clothing to work at this facility and change and shower before they can go home because it's such a high security system. The other part of that is the radiation. It's a gamma radiation of these pupa to break up their chromosomes so that they cannot give off good sperm. That's how the process works. So these are really in depth, they're very high tech, and it works really well. But we only have the ability to grow 100 million flies right now, and we need 500 million at least per week. There is new technology coming to help us grow just males, because right now we are growing males and females, because we've not had the technology to only grow female flies at this moment. So that's coming, and that's called the Nova Fly. It will hopefully, it should start in our Mexico facility, which is going to be opening very soon. So once they reach the pupa stage, some of you may have seen these green flies. They're all over the internet. There's some really good videos that some news media have had the opportunity to make. I'd recommend watching those. They do go into detail about this, and then it helps us not freak out about the green flies. The green dye, and I know they're using other colors. I saw yesterday a yellow and an orange, is to help facilitate identification of the sterile flies in the nature. So when we're releasing them in large numbers, we want to make sure we're watching them, but we also want to make sure we're not missing any wild ones that happen to be out there. So they're just dyeing them to make it easier for those that are testing and looking for them to know they've found the sterile flies. They will tend to have a little bit of dust on them. They also glow under a black light with this technology. Releases are done by these ground chambers, and then they also, which is pupa filled, they'll put the pupa in those. They'll also hatch them in the facility in South Texas, which is at more air base. It's called a dispersal facility. They'll hatch them, they'll chill them, and they'll release them by plane. So you can watch those flight patterns. Somebody knows where that app is. I don't know where that is to watch where the flight pattern of that plane is, but you can see where they're dropping those flies. They also have a truck-mounted approach where they drive by and they spray them out. So obviously the flies get more aerial dispersal throughout areas they haven't found them. The others, they'll use those ground chambers at locations where an infestation has been identified, because clearly there was a wild female somewhere there at some point. The other facilities are coming. So again, the top one in this little picture, it's a little hard to see them, but that's the Copeg in Panama. Our newest one will be the middle one, which is Matapa, Mexico. It is almost ready to go online. And then the last one will be the one we have at Moore Air Base, which will be an official production facility, and it's supposed to be open by the end of November, or end of 2027. But Governor Abbott has asked them to do it by May. So we'll see what happens if we get it done, but we need them all. And the other part of that is getting those male strain flies would be really great, because that will increase our number of males into this fight without having to be bigger. We don't need any more resources. We don't need a bigger facility, because the females will die off. So what happens, it kills the larva, and it'll only be males that are grown. So that's coming to help with the fight. Now I'm briefly going to do management guidelines because Dr. Harberth is coming on behind me, and he's our livestock specialist, and he's going to go more into detail on this. I just want to do a little opening on it. So, but main thing we're asking folks to do, in addition to Texas Animal Health Commission, is to inspect. But if you see something, please collect it, and please do the next step, which is to contact Texas Animal Health Commission. So you need to inspect your animals, you find larvae, you need to get those collected. So you need to contact Texas Animal Health Commission. If you have a vet, I recommend contacting them. If you don't have a vet, you need to get a vet, because some of these products, especially if they're not animals listed on the labels, you're going to need a veterinarian in order to treat those animals. And some of these infestations could be pretty intense. They may need a veterinarian care in addition to like antibiotics or some type of, removal that you shouldn't or maybe can't do on your own. So it can be quite tricky in that situation. So vets are important. What we have learned from other countries is that if we keep our animals healthy, we should see less impact to these animals. Now, I don't know all the situations or the cases we have right now, but a lot of them have been calves, right? They've been newborns, and that's expected, unfortunately, and that's tough. But that also goes back to practices of working calves even in the pasture that we don't technically have to do anymore because we got rid of this fly. Well, unfortunately, you may have to do it again now, at least until that fly is brought back out of Mexico, right? So, so you want to at least be utilizing ectoparasitic management of some types for your animals. Treat for ticks, treat for other biting flies. The reason is to limit, not eliminate, but if you could eliminate, that'd be great, but to limit the amount of puncture wounds you're getting on those animals that could be used by screwworms. Those products are not labeled for screwworms. They're not probably going to have any impact on the adults, but they are going to minimize their desire to want to be on that animal, because that animal's being taken care of and being treated, right? And if you see any wounds, please treat those immediately, because they will get on any type of wound that's healthy, even brand new wounds, old wounds. If there is, access to the living flesh, they may use. So it doesn't need to be, again, a very grotesque situation. It could be just a very little scrape. If you run into maggots, these are the 3 products that are on the market. They're permethrin aerosol sprays that are labeled with screwworms. They're also labeled for other maggots. Now, there's been a lot of discussion, should I spray every wound with these sprays too? And I say no, because permethrin spray is painful. It's alcohol-based, it burns, it hurts, it's not nice. So if your cows or your animals do not have maggots, I wouldn't spray them for maggots. I would spray them for wound treatment, right? The silver stuff, the whatever those Allure, there's different wound treatments I've seen out there. Putting that over seals that so she can't smell it. That is just as effective, if not more effective, than spraying your animal with a permethrin spray that's only going to temporarily protect them and then also burn them for no reason, right? So that's just coming from me as an entomologist. I would not be spraying with permethrin until I had maggots that I needed to kill. Other thing to note, if you do use this and you end up with maggots on your animals, don't spray them until you've collected them. And you can call Animal Health Commission first. So last night kind of came up. These maggots are not going to jump out of the animal because you found them, right? I think some people think it's like a cockroach. Oh, I see it and now it's gone, right? No, they're not going anywhere. They are eaten and they are hungry. So you have time. It's not a, I gotta do this instantly kind of thing. You just need to get that animal secured, maintained so you can find it again. Call your vet, call Animal Health Commission, say, hey, I got some larvae of concern. They'll tell you what to do next. You need an FAD number from them. You need to know where to send those samples into, and they will tell you that. They're the only ones that can tell you that. They will also provide a shipping label if you need that, depending on how far you are. You all are kind of close to the zone. You have Pleasanton just around the corner, not too far from here. That is a facility that's taking them, as well as Kerrville, and then others are going up to Iowa. So there are different multiple places. They will be the ones to tell you where to take them to. You have time. The larvae are not going to vacate that body until you force them to. But if you start spraying them, they're going to come tearing out of there because it's permethrin and it's alcohol and it hurts and they hate it. So that's not your first step. Your first step is to contact people, get that animal in an area where you can treat it appropriately and collect those maggots. We need the maggots. Do not burn them. I heard of a situation yesterday, they burnt them all and kept one. We can identify just one, but please keep more than one if you can. If you're gonna put them in something, alcohol is best. Any type of alcohol is best. If you don't have a material, put them in a container and stick them in the freezer. They are not gonna survive that freezer, and then we can still identify them. They won't get damaged. We can also DNA test them, because that's also being done to these maggots. So it's not as, you know, again, it's not that you have to do it immediately because they're gonna go anywhere, but we wanna follow some rules and regulations. Carl, you gonna go through these? You want me to? I can go high level, you'll come back? Okay, so. Okay, he doesn't touch them at all. So these are the products that have been approved. You can find these on screwworm.gov. They do have a link to their FDA approved products. These are FDA, not EPA, these ones here. Now these are supposed to be limited to when you need to use them. Now some of you are probably from an area that needs to probably be a little more concerned, because again, we're not too far off from some of those infestation zones. I would say that in the sense, if you're seeing wounds, it would definitely probably get prepared to maybe need to treat with some of these. I'm not for over-treating our animals, but we want to be cautious. We want to prevent dealing with an infestation for sure. So they do have different rules to them. Dectomax is the one that's being utilized most frequently. It is labeled for a preventative and a treatment for cattle of many different types. So if you do have any dairy cattle, they're on there too. We also have heifers and horses and swine, sheep, and deer over the counter. If it's another species, you'll need a veterinarian to assist you in that capacity. It will work for 21 days. Doesn't mean you have to retreat every 21 days. That was the question last night. I don't know if the label even says you can do that, but that is not how we properly use Dectomax. Only use it as needed. So it is not a product you should be giving a shot to them every 21 days because you are terrified of screwworms. We only want to do it when we need to do it to limit in a resistance issue of other parasites. That's the thing, is we have other parasites that are not going to go away, and we still need to be able to kill them when the screwworm is gone. And if we overuse these products, we're not going to be able to do that. The other one is Ivomect. I'll mention that one next because it's another, and that's the injectable only. Same with Ivomect, it's the injectable only, and it's only for cattle. So that's the only one that's been given over-the-counter usage for cattle with Ivomect, but it's a prevention only. It is not found to be very effective against active larval feeding situations. So what it means is you should only give it to a newborn animal, when you castrate that animal at that time, and then if you find a wound that's not infested. The problem is it doesn't kill the big larva. So it's good to control those little itty bitties when they first hatch out in that first 24-hour period, but after that, the efficacy drops significantly on this product with controlling maggots. So that's why it's got a limited approach on it. Nagasont powder is another approved. This is under USDA, so you may not have access to it unless you're in an infested zone. I have not heard anybody say yet they've used it, but it is a tool that we have available in case of an emergency, right, kind of deal. The F10 antiseptic sprays and ointments are labeled for multi-species. If you can find it, right now online is the only place I'm aware of you can find it. Haven't heard of any local operations with it. But it's the one with the cypermethrin in it. So there is other sprays by F10, but they don't have the insecticide. And that's for treatment, again, for wounds with maggots, for many species, including cattle, horse, sheep, goat, deer, raptors, other wildlife, pet birds, mammals, captive animals, though in zoos and not ones that we're feeding. But it's not labeled for dogs, cats, and pigs. So do keep that in mind. And lastly, on the bottom is Exalt cattle. This one is a little bit more expensive. It is a pour-on. It works up to 14 days for both prevention and treatment at this time. It's labeled up to 14 days. There is potential talk that it will be lasting longer than that. It's just the research was only done for 14 days. They didn't decide to test it any longer. So we don't have the research data to support how long it lasts. They are doing those studies right now to extend that time period. But this is a fluoroliner. It's a different kind of active, so it works differently. It's only labeled for cattle. It does have some stipulations. It can't be used in dairy calves, veal calves, or bulls at least 1 year of age intended for breeding. It does have a 44-day withdrawal period on it though, so that is another area of concern, and you do need a prescription. And for cats and dogs, there are several things out there, not a ton, but a few. So Credelio and Credelio Cat, Credelio Quattro, NexGard Combo, and now Capstar have been labeled for cats and dogs. I've been asked many times about Bravecto. They're not on the list yet. And I will use the word yet. I don't know what the holdup is because it's the same active as some of these others, but they're technically not listed. So again, if you've had that conversation, I've had it multiple times in the last few days and it's not there. I think I saw some cameras. I did want to go briefly. There are some EPA listed insecticides, some of which I talked to you, the sprays, the different aerosol sprays. Some of these others on here, I don't want to spend a lot of time. One thing to note, they're all permethrin, but a lot of these, in my opinion, are not necessarily the approach that you want to target right this moment. These are going to be on animal sprays, but if they're not labeled to treat maggots, they're not really going to do the job you need them to do. So just keep that in mind. I do not recommend premise treatments, which is what this is, and do not use ULV to try and kill blowflies, especially screwworm flies, because you're not going to kill a single screwworm fly out there trying to spray your pasture, because they're probably not there. You're going to kill a ton of bees, you're going to kill a ton of butterflies, and a ton of ladybugs. I'll bring the ladybugs that Dr. Santiago just talked about, because we don't want to kill his predators. We need to keep those other organisms alive. We don't kill flies by spraying the environment. That's not an effective method for killing any fly, really. Those need to be targeted. Now, if you want to spray around your barns, these ones have screwworms on them here in the big square box with the red around it. Those are premise treatments, and you're probably not going to kill a screwworm either, but I can't stop you from treating your barn for flies. That's because the screwworm is not hanging out in your barn. It does not care to be at a barn. It is a pastured animal. It is a out in the wild animal. It does not live with people. So it's not going to interact with these areas. And then lastly, again, wildlife, I mentioned them a little earlier. If you see something, this is the QR code that gets you to your biologist if you don't know that person. They have several now working. They're working very diligently. They're working hand in hand with Texas Animal Health Commission. They're doing a lot of the surveillances on animals, so you may be interacting with them already. Call your game warden if you see something, and your biologist. Like I said, depends on where you are on what they'll tell you to do if you encounter an infested animal. So please contact them. They're wanting our assistance to look for wounds. So if you see anything on a game camera that looks suspicious, wound does not mean maggots, but if you see a wound that looks like, ooh, it's just not looking good, you see an animal acting funny, these animals are not going to be running through the pasture if they are infested with screwworms. They're going to be hanging around, looking mopey, looking sad, dying. They're dying is what they're doing. So we do want to report any suspicious activity. Right now, and I tried to get some updating from Dr. Blum last night because I'm a little off when it comes to wildlife populations in the state. But you could be in one of the two areas right now where you're either in fawning or going into fawning, and I apologize for not knowing officially. Yesterday in Junction they said something different that threw me off. Or you could be in where velvet is. And velvet is a concern at certain times because if they're scraping their antlers, trying to rub that off, they could be susceptible. But then there's, I guess, a time where the bone underneath gets really strong, so they may not be susceptible. There's a lot of unknowns because back when we had screwworms, there weren't all these people watching the deer. And there weren't that many deer to watch, right? Because they were all dead because screwworms killed them probably. But there was a big impact from the screwworms to the deer. So we're still learning. So that's just something to note, but if you see something suspicious, please report it. And I have 2 slides left. This one, if you need to contact Texas-A&M Health Commission, the 1-800 number is manned by a veterinarian at all times. They alternate which veterinarian is going to be there. You all fall in the Pleasanton region, I believe now, where we're at. So please, you can contact that office directly. They have several folks there. That's their new hub. They moved it from Beeville down to Pleasanton, so you should always get a person there. You can contact them. If anybody did travel up from the Laredo region, you can call that office too, or down from the other, which is Stephenville. But you can call those or the 1-800 number. There's also the number, the 512 is the number for Texas Parks and Wildlife. They do have other numbers if you're in the infested zone. I apologize, I don't have them in here. I'm still making sure I have those correct before I add them and give you all the wrong numbers, because I don't live in an infested zone, so I'm trying to grasp when I come down here what all's going on. And if you want more information, this QR code will take you to all of our AgriLife material, including our fact sheets, and our websites. Additional websites, it also links to the screwworm.gov. I think it links to Texas-A&M Health Commission. So this is another resource you can use to find a lot of different information. We just newly made that, so if you have any comments about that, I'd be glad to hear about those. So, all right, I stayed close to my time, but and I still have this slide because I hadn't officially combined the two. If you want to reach me directly, there's my email there. If you have any, what is this fly questions, those can come to me, or our other one, we have Screwworm at Ag is another place. Animal Health Commission would really like us not to send them fly pictures. They don't have time for flies. The fly is not the stage of importance, it's maggots. So maggots go to them for sure. If you need any assistance, we're all here to help in AgriLife Extension. We'll facilitate you forward. We do have, I believe you have collecting kits, right, Taryn? Or not? Yes. So our counties down here do have collecting kits to assist you as well. A lot of your veterinarians have already been through the courses. They're prepared. We're all here to help. We don't want to cause panic, but we want people to at least be diligent in reporting anything suspicious so that we can control it as fast as possible. All right, I'm done. Questions now, or you want to wait till after Carl does? I don't know, it's up to him, couldn't you? Any quick questions on the fly side? I'll be happy to answer. I'm going to hang around for Dr. Harworth to go too, so if there's more questions then I'll be here too. Yes, ma'am.
Have y'all been consistently doing the production of flies, or is that just a recent thing that started?
No, so that's been a misinformation. The fly facility has never shut down since it opened. COPEC has constantly been running now. It was running at lower levels to maintain those populations in the Darien Gap up until last year when we increased those numbers to 100 million, but it has always been in production.
Repeat the question when you do it too.
Any more questions for Dr. Swiger right now?
I have a question. So the fly traps that people hang in their backyard, are you saying do not hang those?
If you're in successful fly traps that we hang up for house flies, is really those are for, they will attract little flies. If you're in an area where they're releasing sterile flies, I recommend not putting those up. While those will they couldn't kill it with sterile screwworms because there's so many of them, right? Normally, if you hang those traps up, you won't get screwworms in them because they're so low in numbers. But right now, if you're in an area where they're releasing them by the millions, and you will. So you're actually working against the procedure. So yeah, I wouldn't use those unless you absolutely have to use them. I would switch to something else right now, maybe a bait,
With all the booby
something like that,
traps.
and the flies wouldn't be trapped. And if you do get low flies in them, I'm
So with all
pretty
the
sure
booby
they're not
traps,
going to be.
You get someone walks around like I do, I'm not.
And yeah. That's a great question. Sure.
Facility at Fort Air Force Base, is that a production facility, and when did you say it was going to be?
So at Moore Air Force Base, they have 2 facilities technically, but the only one open is the dispersal facility. They opened that in February, so the flies are being made in Panama, shipped up to that facility, and then they prep
I've got
them to
2 in
deliver
my
them out.
bag if we need to get one.
They're also building a new production facility there as well. It's under works. I don't know, I haven't been down there to see how far along they've gotten, but they have officially started building it, and it'll be ready next year. So the old facility that was at Mission, which is the same place in Moore Base, it was condemned years ago, and now it's not operating, so that's building. Yes, sir.
Driving in and out of an affected area with a household pet, a dog or a cat, is that also happening?
If you're in an infested area, I would still call Texas Animal Health Commission before you travel with that pet. And if you're going to go to Mexico, you need to also go through different things now. They changed those rules because of the dog that ended up traveling. So I will contact them first, and they'll tell you what they think you need to do. If you're just driving through one, nothing to worry about. But if you live in that infested area, it would be best to just say, hey, I'm going to do this. You need to inspect my animal if you haven't already had that animal inspected. But if they come to your property and inspect your livestock, they're going to check your companion animals too. So they're checking all animals that you got and beyond. All right, well, thank you. I said I'll hang around until our work is done, so if there's more questions.
Thank you, Dr. Swiger. That's a lot of information. We have a lot of information that we're going through today, and there's lots of questions to be asked. And I think it's good that, we're running here on schedule, but there's lots of good questions that are popping up. Another thing on that agenda, if you picked one up, there are QR codes. One goes to the same site that Dr. Swiger mentioned as the Screwworm. One is for Mealybug, and the other one goes to the Texas Animal Health Commission Screwworm site where it has the map and all their information there as well. But I'm going to go ahead and keep rolling. Turn it over to Dr. Carl Harper. He is a livestock extension specialist and assistant professor based out of the Corpus Christi Center. He's going to be talking about management considerations for mitigating the impact of the screwworm. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Taryn. Is that loud enough for everybody? We're good? Well, it's always good to be in God's country, not to make fun of the sign when you're coming into town. One thing I did learn today that used to when I grew up on the east side of San Antonio, and always used to be an hour or less. Heck, we used to be able to make it to Hondo in 45 minutes. Do not try that again in 45 minutes. It won't happen. There's more stop signs and stop lights. It's probably not going to put you on a good mood when I have that conversation, is it? Either way, today I'm going to keep going off of what Dr. Swiger talked about, and I'm going to take a little bit of a different perspective on it, and I'm going to talk about things we can do around our operations that will mitigate the impact of this. If it becomes a more widespread issue, infestations become wider spread, and it may happen until we get more flies, as that's been established. It's going to take us a while to push this back. Right now, the infestation appears to be low, which is fantastic. It is spreading, but there's things that attribute to that are beyond me. The great thing is you got to hear from an entomologist today. We don't have a veterinarian on the program. I'm not either one of those. And I like to put that disclaimer out there. I'm just a ruminant nutritionist who became a pseudo New World Screwworm expert by just because of proximity of where I work. And I got short straw on that deal. And so either way, you've got to have a valid veterinary client-patient relationship in place. Have that relationship with your veterinarian. A lot of those drugs and compounds we listed, not a lot of them, some are over the counter. But there are some things and products out there that are scripted and need to be under the guidance of a veterinarian that will work pretty well. If we look at some of the data on those products, that new Exalt product, it's a pour-on, it's a brand new compound for us in the animal health world, livestock world, I should say. It's been around in the companion animal, but to get that product, we've got to have that relationship. Veterinarians also have the ability to know what's going on in our region way better than we do. So make sure we have a relationship with a vet, maybe have more than one vet. It's hard. The more rural you get, the less vets there are, but I try to keep 2 or 3 on my phone and have that relationship in case I need it or have a problem. So we start talking about management things we're going to do. First and foremost, above everything, it's going to be monitoring and surveilling our herd. Sometimes that's easier said than done. Is it easier said than done? Because number one, we haven't had to do this for half a century really, but a lot of us run cows in pastures that we don't see those cows in an extended period of time, especially when we don't need to, or we're not used to. So we recommend, and Dr. Schweiger talked about the life cycle of the fly. We recommend you check your animals a minimum of every 2 to 3 days. And if we think about that life cycle, we think about that female lays her eggs, they hatch within 10 to 12 hours. We'll see those maggots at about day 3 to 5 is when we can really start to see them. And I'm going to show some pictures that I have. We're trying to accumulate more and more. It's been hard to get good pictures of things you need to be looking for because obviously we don't have the problem in the U.S., so not having a source becomes a problem. I have some pictures out of Central America to show some things. Hopefully some of these we don't get to. But either way, checking those animals every 2 to 3 days. That way we can catch infestations early, we can get those animals treated, and the impact on the herd is way, way less. Obviously we're still in the infancy of this, so surveillance, monitoring, discovering it gets sterile flies released. Once sterile flies are released, that's a good thing, because for us to beat this, we beat it once with sterile flies. Once we have enough sterile flies, we will beat it again. The other key component of that is surveillance and monitoring. And then obviously stop movement and controlling movement. Really controlling movement's a better phrase, of making sure we're not carrying this 70, 80, 100 miles, because that fly is not going to travel that far. As Dr. Schweiger said, that fly has one goal in life, and that's to reproduce. They're going to travel until they get a host, though, to do that. So what are we looking for if we're going out and looking every 2 to 3 days? These pictures are off the USDA's website. You know, I think areas that we're going to need to focus on are ears, especially if we tag cattle recently. Ears, if we have tick problems, ticks are going to be an issue and open the door for that screwworm fly to lay her eggs. Other wounds that might happen around the ranch, the biggest concern to me are going to be that neonate, the newborns, and the dams or females that just have those. Those two are very vulnerable in our system. And so we have to monitor those and check them as often as we can. If you look at the data that Dr. Schweiger showed of Mexico and the results from Seneca that they have accumulatively, bovines are number 1 on the list. Of those, a majority of them are going to be newborn calves. And so monitoring those calves, possibly working with your veterinarian on a plan to treat that navel and take care of that calf in any form or fashion that we need to. Now, y'all are pretty close to the infested zone, right? Maybe some of you might be in the infested zone. That's a different conversation I'm having with my veterinarian. Versus me, who I'm an hour east of here, I'm not as concerned yet. There's things that I want to make a plan for, but I'm not actually doing them. So you're out looking at your cows in the pasture. We feed some cubes because we need to get them up closer and train them to do that. These are early infestations. These all come out of central, well, these two are, this is just a wound on a muzzle of a cow that she has flies coincidentally are on. That doesn't mean they're screwworm flies. But these here, they don't look like this, right? It's early infestation. Thing about it is, depending on how old these infestations are, these wounds could be very small on the surface, but very, very big and deep inside. Because we think about what that larvae is going to do. It's going to feed and drive in and keep feeding until it gets to about 7 days of age, or goes through its 3 instar stages, and then it's going to pupate onto the ground. You know, I don't think we're going to, when we talk about surveillance and inspecting, we need to get down and inspect hooves and everything else. But if I got a group of cows and at home right now, if I got one limping, I'm going to blame it on one of 2 things: cracked hooves or possibly foot rot. Depends on the environment or whatever else. I'm probably going to want to get them up now and look at them and make sure there's not something else going on there between their hooves. These pictures are from Tabasco, Mexico, friend of a friend. They're learning how to deal with this too, again. You know, group of replacement heifers were all ear tagged, didn't really think much of it, come back a week later and it was sort of a, oops, probably should have not done that. Or monitor them, possibly protect them, spray them with something. This wound's getting a little deeper, a little more involved, but you know, we get into some of these situations where we miss one, we might have to go in and clean a wound out and get all that necrotic tissue and get as many of those maggots as we can out of there and treat that so that animal will recover as fast as possible. You know, we wait 7, 14 days depending on where the infection is, the type of infection, you know, any kind of secondary sepsis. These cattle, livestock, whatever we're talking about, may perish faster than that if we don't catch it soon enough. So there's things that we do around our operation that I call elective activities that we're going to have to think about when we do them or exactly how we do them. Those type of things are going to be branding, because really if we brand, hot iron branding for sure, you know, I brand today, I could cover that wound with something, but that wound doesn't really peel or start showing an opening until a week or 2 later. And so we have to maybe move that to a cooler time of year. Castration, Dr. Swiger talked about it. Even banding, when that falls off, there's a little bit of a scab there, so it still opened the door. I still think that's a better option than knife cut. Really and truly moving it to a time of year where there's less flies is going to be a better option. Dehorning, here we go there. Best way to dehorn is with the pole bull. I can't really, you know, dehorning is going to be an open wound that we're going to have to protect. The other natural things that happen, calving, lambing, kidding, foaling, all those things are natural things that happen on our operations all the time. We can't really control them happening, but we can control when they happen. There are operations in South Texas already that have moved their calving seasons to December, January-ish. That may be an option, it may not be an option for you. It's a pretty monumental move in some situations. Sometimes it's easy. You calve in October, you just turn the bull out later. But if you calve in the spring, it's hard to go the other way. And so, you know, you're going to have to balance that in your programs. I've actually sort of settled in on, if you don't have a calving season and these infestations become more widespread, you might want to consider creating a calving season, just because I know those 90 days I'm going to have to dip navels and treat calves and monitor calves and do those things during those 90 days. If I'm calving year round, I'm going to go insane trying to keep up with that. So things to think about. Any other wounds? We'll talk about external parasite infestation. Ticks are going to be a big concern, and trying to do our best to control those. So if we're out monitoring these clinical signs, typically larvae we can see by day 3. They're up to 17 millimeters long. Like that very first calf from the prior, how they noticed that there was a bloody discharge coming out of its navel. I've never experienced the foul. How many of y'all dealt with this 50 years ago? Handful of, well, I shouldn't put years on it. That's not, I'd probably get in trouble with HR by putting years on it. But how many of y'all dealt with it before? Good number. It's about the same we get in every group. The one thing that everyone talks about is the odor and the foul odor that came from the wounds. And it's at a whole nother level than dead animals and the putrid smell that you get there. And so that's one thing that we need to monitor and look for. Hopefully we don't get into. I talked about this already. That wound may be a little hole on the outside, but can be pretty deep and disgusting inside. Just with like any other situation, we know our animals. We know when an animal's sick. If they're isolated, depressed, head down, not wanting to eat, not wanting to be with the rest of the group, head shaking, any of these long list of possible options, we probably need to do further investigation on the animal to see what's wrong with them. So, a segue slide for me, but 3 years ago I was looking for some information, trying to make a presentation on parasite control, external parasite control. I came across a digital version of the 1954 Cattleman magazine. Anybody get the Cattleman magazine? A few people in the room. It was actually sort of fun because I sat there for way too long, wasting time flipping through it and looking at ads and looking at the names and a lot of the operations that still exist today, and that are long-lasting cattle operations. Either way, I'm rambling. Came across this ad here, and of course I said I was making a presentation on parasite control, and sure enough, this Franklin Serum ad talks about what their cures are for horn flies, and the same thing I'm talking about probably 70 years later when I found this. But either way, pink eye, still things we're dealing with today. There was also a bunch of other big stinky fly traps and all kinds of things advertised in there, which I thought was pretty ironic. Fast forward to last summer, I started looking at that ad, and all of a sudden I started seeing all these screwworm treatments. I didn't pay attention to it before because we didn't have to deal with it, right? But after talking to people about it, Smear 62 was something everybody mentioned and remembered, this black salve that has benzoyl, I can't even tell you the names that are in there, but it was a black salve that they got all over themselves and things that none of these products will be available to us anymore because of what's in them. Between Lindane and DDT and all these other products that are no longer approved by the EPA, they're not going to be an option. I did steal the EQ 3035 picture off the web. I've heard that it's still, I shouldn't say this out loud, it's still available in Mexico from what I've heard. It probably should not be used on food animals, let's put it that way. Either way, parasite control becomes very, very important. Now, I want to be very clear that things I'm going to talk about from a parasite control, and I'm not getting into it very deep because I don't have enough time today, but hornfly control, lice control, ticks, grubs, which grubs aren't a big deal anymore because of the products we have to us, but they used to be. My coworker Ron Gill talks about as a kid, before school, he'd have to go check the herd, and one thing they were always looking for were grub holes, because that's where flies, those screwworm flies would lay their eggs. But you think about it, and even though there's not a lice season, there is a lice season because they like cooler weather. But come January, December, if my cows are in a pasture, and I see them just rubbing up against a brush pile, going to town, I most likely probably have lice in the herd. Are they going to get a screwworm infestation from that? No. But if she rubs hard enough and long enough and irritates a spot, that could open the door for a New World screwworm female to lay her eggs. So little things like that we have to pay attention to, that we can't let lapse and go on. Tick bites, they say one tick bite. If you got a tick infestation, you're going to have more than one tick. And there's going to be a bunch of bites, a bunch of irritations and things that we're going to have to pay attention to. Great guide, not because she's in the room, but very great resource is Dr. Swiger's External Management Parasite Control extension handout that we have. If you're interested in that, you can scan that, or we can get you a copy of it. So the next thing, if we find wounds, we find issues, Dr. Swiger talked about this a little bit. If infestation is not an imminent threat, then I probably just need to treat the wound and move on. If we are in an infested zone or it's imminent, then we probably need to treat it and then probably use some other insecticide products that go with that. She already threw these up there earlier, but these three have been labeled forever for screwworms and have been available on every feed store's counter there is. Now, F10 was approved last year for screwworm treatments. I've been told it's going to be easier to find. I bought a bottle off of Amazon right after it was approved. It was very expensive, and I don't know where it came from. It's not readily available in the U.S., but supposedly supplies are on their way. Just a controlled iodine spray, something we might need to treat a wound, possibly if your veterinarian recommends to use that on a navel, then the dry navel up, that's one way to go. Protecting other wounds, possibly with the aluminum sprays, AluShield. Don't go crazy with it because those little cans are not cheap, but it could be a great barrier to protect the wound. I know it's a show steer. I use this in picture in a lot of other presentations, but you know, it's just to depict protecting a wound. This is an elective wound. We had it surgically dehorned, it's sutured, and then we spray that on there to protect it from the flies. Same slide picture that Dr. Swiger put up, but we talk about all these things, branding, castrating, dehorning, things that we do, you know, they're just normal best management practice for us now. You know, do we need to think about shifting those to a different time of year where there's less fly activity? I think the answer is probably yes if we get into a much bigger infestation. So if we look at this data is temperature data from Hebronville, but it's going to be close enough. And the blue lines is the average monthly low temperature. The red line is the average high temperature. This yellow line up top is sort of the upper threshold, and this blue line is the lower threshold, the straight ones. And that area in between, that grayed area, is where the fly's happy place is, where the temperature where they're going to thrive. Below that, we can go back and say, well, we're just going to start reducing fly activity. But as we get above that now, above that, it doesn't reduce it as much as we'd like, because I'm like, well, we're going to be above 95 for the next 10 days, right? Or close to it. Well, I don't think it's going to stop them enough. So the purpose of this slide, though, is these green areas, possibly yellow areas, depending on the year, are probably the better times, lower fly activity times, that we could possibly do some of these practices. It might be a monumental switch in mindset to change that, especially calving, like I said. I like to recommend that, but it's easier said than done. So we have things we can do in the lower, in quotes, lower fly seasons. Now, how many of y'all seen flies pop in January? We get a little stretch of 90-degree weather, and all of a sudden, 2-3 weeks later, boom, we've got flies again. And typically we get zapped with cold weather and they go away, but it's not always going to happen. But doing some of these things during lower, cooler months will help reduce that impact. You know, we get into that warmer season where we have to do some things, we got to double consider it. Now, if I'm in a niche market and I need a cab between May and August, you know that going into it, so you're going to have to be a little more diligent at home and in your monitoring every day to monitor those animals. Okay, Dr. Swiger talked about some of the products. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of each one of these that have been approved. I do have a few slides on them, but I talk about them from a different angle. And I want to talk about them from maintain efficacy and a judicious use of those products. So, first of all, read the label, follow the label, dose properly, and follow withdrawal time. Exalt, she threw it up there, I'll mention it here. When it was first released, and I'm trying to remember if it was in December or when that was, it came out with a 98-day withdrawal. 98 withdrawal could cause some issues from a marketing standpoint in some situations, so we got to pay attention to that. It has actually been reduced now. The label actually has a 44-day withdrawal if those cattle are in an environment that's above 60 degrees. So it helps us down this part of the world quite a bit, but we still have to watch that. And it becomes a little bit of a gray area. But withdrawal is something we have to pay attention to. Even with Dectomax. Dectomax is the current drug of choice for treatment to move out of these infested areas. It has a 35-day withdrawal. So if they're going to be sent to harvest, that's why they put that exception in there. Animals going to harvest have 72 hours to get there. If they're leaving an infested zone, they don't have to be treated. Proper dosing. How many of y'all weigh your cows or know the weights of every cow? I'm not shaming you. I don't either. But how do we know how to dose some of these products? If I'm going to pour my cows with a wormer, what do we normally do? 1,500 pounds, let her fly, right? As long as we're not overdosing, we're doing a good thing. We don't want to underdose because we're going to open the door to resistance, possibly not just from a New World screwworm standpoint, but just everything else that we're worming for annually, stomach worms, those type of things. So paying attention to that. When we're using pour-ons and those other type of products, look at the label. All their labels are going to show this because this is pretty standard operating, but when we pour them, this is where we're supposed to do it. Too many times I cringe because you see on Facebook where people are trying to do this and just tossing on them when they're running down the lane. And that's not an effective way to do it. One, I'm getting half on the ground, half on this cow, and then the other half is on the cow on the backside, so she's getting double dosed. And so we need to be careful with that. Sampling. Most of the county agent offices in South Texas along the border have these sampling kits, not these old ones. These are antiques that need to go into a display. But I got these from the Guadalupe County Extension Office. They found some in an old closet. Same concept. If you were familiar with these, this is a new one in the back, and I want to talk about that a little bit. I have my slides I ordered. These two numbers need to be in your phone. One is Texas A&M Health Commission. If you suspect something, call them. If it's a wildlife issue, call Texas Parks and Wildlife. Now, like I said, I have my slides out of order. This is what the kit looks like on the inside. It's got a submission form, some tweezers, a little container with some alcohol in it, and some gloves. There were 3,000 of these made so far and distributed. There's veterinarians, Parks and Wildlife has some, everyone should have some. Obviously, we only sent 5 or so to every county. I think we overloaded the South Texas group, which we probably miscalculated that where it showed up. Either way. Now, where I wanted to go with this though is we call this number here and say, I've got this, I want a submitted sample. Do not just take a sample, fill this out, throw it in here and ship it. As most of you have heard, they moved Iowa to Kerrville. Or no, I'm sorry, they moved that portion of the lab to Kerrville. That was supposed to be a joke, but it didn't come out right, sorry. Call Texas A&M Health Commission. They will get you either a new mailer or let you know where to send it. Because we don't want to drop this in the mail to go to Iowa, because we don't know how long it's going to take to get there. If they're doing this in Kerrville, that makes it's a lot faster to drive something or even ship it to Kerrville to get something checked. So once again, if you have this, you're going to fill it out, call them, they'll give you an FAD number, and that FAD number is what will go on here, and they'll also help you get that information. This is our website. I left this in here. I didn't bring any copies. I can get copies to Taryn. We made this handout last week. It's a front and back that answers. You can scan each one of these informational groups, and what it's actually doing is all these handouts are being updated all the time. And so if I give you one of these handouts now, it might not be the most updated version tomorrow. And so we've tried to centralize this a little bit. And so it's 2 pages front and back, or it's 1 page front and back, and there's a lot of information in this one piece of paper, but I didn't bring any copies. I'm sort of putting Taryn on the spot here. I can get you that, or we can get you that. All right, one shameless plug. If you've never been to Beef Cattle Short Course first week of August, I recommend you go. Information is there. To wrap things up though, stay on time, perfect. Maintaining or establishing a veterinary client-patient relationship is going to be crucial. We should have one anyway, but in this situation it really is important. I can't stress how important it is to inspect your cattle, your livestock, your sheep, goats, whatever it is you were raising, or all the above, every 2 to 3 days. One, you'll catch things sooner. I know it's easier said than done in a lot of situations, but that way we can catch things early, get them treated, and it's less impact on the animals, and they recover faster. Also, in the early stages like we're in now, we catch things earlier. If we're not in an infested zone, we can find it and get sterile flies to that area and head it off as fast as possible. You know, every one of our operations is different. We have different livestock, we do things differently, we have at different times, have different goals. So we have to look at each one of those operations separately and look at the risks that we have in our operation and address those individually. You know, if I'm talking to an Angus breeder, he's not worried about dehorning, right? But there's other things that they may have to deal with going forward. Work on your external parasite control program. I think there's a lot of concern on the ticks, obviously any other irritation. But remember, treating for horn flies is not going to help me directly on New World screwworm fly. As Dr. Swigert talked about, that fly is looking for a wound. That female senses that wound. She comes straight into that wound, and then she lays her eggs, and she's out. I've never asked her how long. I know she stepped out of the room. How long it takes for her to lay her eggs, but that's her goal in life. She's not going to congregate on the back with the rest of the horn flies or anything else. You know, from an insect pest management, IPM program, the goal of that's to break the life cycle. With the New World screwworm, how we break that life cycle is through the sterile insects, or the sterile females that we're, sterile males that we're releasing. Treat and protect wounds. Obviously, if they don't have a host, can't find a host, they'll eventually die off. It's almost impossible probably to get rid of all of them, because when we inspect them, we need to look for wounds. But we also need to look for infestations, because we need to check those mucosal areas around their eyes, their nose. Females that just gave birth are very vulnerable also, so we need to monitor all of them. I can't stress enough on using the products we have available to us in the most efficient way possible. In other words, I'm not going to use these products for prevention unless my threat is imminent. In other words, my neighbor's got it, right? I think we've got to be careful with that. We need to monitor and look for the maggot, not the fly. With that, I don't have a conclusion slide. Other than that, I will open it up to questions, or Dr. Swigert can probably help answer questions too, if y'all have any for her. Y'all quiet bunch. Yes, ma'am.
You already have a set pest control system for your ranch. Do you suggest we continue to do that if we're in an uninfected area, or do we need to add to that?
You know, I think I would continue doing it. I would evaluate it, talk to the veterinarian, and make sure there's not something you want to tweak that might interact with it if you have to adjust to the world for fly infestation. But from what conversations I'm hearing, no, I will not stop doing anything. And they tweak it though, if they do something different if a veterinarian feels it benefits you if you have an infestation.
I didn't mean to stop it, but for example, if you say you spray or doctor them every 6 months, continue with that same thing and don't make it for a shorter period of time?
As long as that's what you've been doing and what you think is working, if that's working, I would not change anything. I would actually, I'm not saying do more, but I would reevaluate to make sure you don't need to do more. Everyone I've talked to in South Texas so far this year is prime time fly environment compared to what we've had for the past 3 or 4 years. Flies are back.
What's the best way to treat those young calves?
So I recommend a visit with the veterinarian, but typically, you know, taking care of that navel protected, and then talking to the veterinarian to see if there's anything more that they recommend beyond that. I think it's going to depend on how close you are, how imminent that threat is, depending on what you need to be doing. There's a lot of discussion on that, but for sure we have that navel is that number one target pretty much of everything on newborn, so protecting it as much as possible. Yeah. Oh, online inspector. Yes, I did have a slide there today. The question or the comment was about I don't want to say our, I guess I was a part of it, so that's why I say our. There is a course that was released a week ago Saturday that is on our website that you obtain through AgriLife Learner that is it was ultimately designed, if you wanted to become an inspector, you had to take this course to become part of the certification process. The great thing about it is it's actually a great educational tool that if you're just interested in learning more about the whole situation, all the way from the fly through the process and everything else, then it's there. I don't have the website offhand on me, otherwise I would pull that up. I need to do that next time. Thank you though. Any other questions? I appreciate the opportunity of being here, and I'll be around if anybody has any other questions.
Thank you, Dr. Harborough. Again, sorry about running a little long. If you need CEUs, you sign a private applicator license with you. Those CEU certificates are there in the back. One more thing, we're having a webinar that's covering screwworm as well, going into this depth. Both, Carl, are you on there?
I am.
Dr. Schweiger and our wildlife specialist out of Corpus, as well as the Texas Animal Health Commission representative will be on that. That's July 7th from 9 to 11:30 at the St. Paul Lutheran Church. If you want CEUs, it'll be $10 and get you a general and an IPM. If you don't need CEUs, you're free to come. But with that, thank y'all for coming. We appreciate y'all being vigilant and looking out for your livestock and helping us